Welcome to the party. This is going to be kind of a fun, live, something between a podcast and an interview series. We're going to be talking about everything from election to the politics, conspiracy theories, tinfoil, free speech, maha, maga, whatever you got. We're going to go for about 3 hours. I'll tell you the story in a second, but I actually have to drive to Washington State to cast my vote tonight. So we're not going to go all the way till 10 o'clock. We'll probably wrap around 9 o'clock. I'll tell that story in a minute. But we're going to fill gaps between with, I'm going to cover some stuff that's been going on in the news and kind of give some live podcast stuff with sources that we'll be able to see on the screens. We'll also be doing in-person micro podcasts with any of you guys that want to come up and talk about voting, the election, politics, your perspective, crazy tinfoil, whatever you got. Just little fun conversations. Mark has a sign-up sheet that if you want to come up and talk with me for about 15 minutes, take the microphone. Feel free. Don't worry, I don't bite. I'm not going to make a fool of anyone. We're just going to have fun conversations about whatever, friendly and fun. Right now we have 4 people on deck, and I'm happy to have as many people come up and talk as y'all like. And I'm also happy to riff all night because it's kind of what I do for a living. So if you're in the bathroom, we're about to get started. If you're getting your drinks and your food, don't worry. You got lots of time. We're going to take it easy. It's going to be relatively informal tonight. Lots of fun. So if any of you guys don't know who I am, my name's Ian Carroll. I'm something of an online journalist crossed with a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, crossed with just some random dude that didn't know what the heck was going on in 2020 and decided to start learning. And so I started posting on TikTok my process of researching what's going on. And that one thing led to another, and it blew up on TikTok. And then I started to research more important things that were a little spicier, and TikTok quickly shut that down. So I expanded to other platforms that have more pro-free speech alignments. And eventually I met Mark, came here and talked for a couple nights several months ago. And when I hit the road this year to travel, coming here to Old State Saloon and staying with Mark and getting to spend a couple months here in Idaho during this election was an obvious choice. So I'm going to share my thoughts on the election tonight. I'm going to share my thoughts on things that have built up to the election, because there's so many swirling storylines in the news, as well as sort of conspiracy theories that blossom out of those storylines. And some of it has a lot of evidence that we can all share and look at, and some of it is very theoretical that people have their own perspectives on. I like to give the disclaimer in advance of everything that I talk about that I do not know the gospel truth. I am not some super sleuth that knows everything. My perspective is constantly evolving. My opinion is constantly changing as I gain new evidence. And I tend to think in terms of percentages. Most of the time these days, truth is not absolute and it's not black and white. It's more of a judgment game of this seems pretty likely, but this also could be real, and I'm not sure which is which. And as we go forwards, the evidence that comes forwards will adjust my perspective on what I think is most likely happening or what is most likely going on. And that's true both of the news happening currently, but it's also true of historical events, because we know that history has been rewritten many times by the victors of wars, by intelligence agencies spinning narratives, by corporations issuing propaganda. And so we're kind of in this new era of information where we all need to be our own arbiters of truth, and we all need to do our research for ourselves, because everyone has incentive to lie now. And anyone that has any size of platform is approached by large pools of money asking to pay to push certain narratives, myself included. I don't take that money, but lots of people in my seat do. And so you have to think very critically about what kind of information you're taking in, and you have to synthesize it all for yourself. And often I get things wrong, and I talk to other people in chairs like this or on the internet or in various formats, and they share things that I didn't know about, and then I can research more and I can adjust my opinion. So my hope tonight is not to teach you what's going on or share with you the truth about the election, because obviously Lord knows what's about to happen tomorrow. But we're going to have a lot of fun, hopefully de-stress a little bit, hopefully laugh a little bit about how absurd this year has been and about how absurd the current situation is, and hopefully bond over our collective desire to find the truth, though that may be an infinitely impossible goal for the rest of our lives. In a moment, I'm going to call up our first speaker, our first conversationalist. I'm going to be talking with Phil. Pardon me if I mispronounce any names, but Phil Vasile will be coming up in a minute to talk with me. But I want to just give us a quick rundown of a few different things that we're probably going to cover in this talk tonight. On the screens here in the bar, you guys kind of get the inside look at what I've got on my screen here. We'll be sharing that intermittently with the live stream when it's relevant. But in general, we're going to be referencing Twitter. And that is because Twitter has actually become the #1 news app and news platform in America. And that is for good reason, because we're in a bar, so we're all over 21. And so we all come from a time when we were younger, some of us when we were adults even, when centralized media sources were more trustworthy. And maybe they were lying to us at the time too. Vietnam War era, there was plenty of lies being broadcast by those mainstream media organizations, by the corporate news that the CIA had infiltrated, though we did not know it at the time. But at least there were still real journalists out there. At least there were still hardcore journalists that were really digging for the facts, trying their best to do their job within a somewhat captured system. But as intelligence agencies gained power, as the military-industrial complex gained power, as corporations gained power, and they started to realize how important information was, those mainstream news agencies gained more and more shall we say, more and more tentacles and hooks were put into all of our information sources. And over time, these centralized news sources, these centralized information spigots became quite captured. And that was just in time for social media to hit the scene. Unfortunately, most of us didn't realize as social media blossomed that in many ways the centralized powers were ahead of the game. And they actually had their tendrils in those social media spaces long before we realized. And the 2020 election is a great example. X, and formerly Twitter, is sort of the most obvious example of what Elon has termed a crime scene. Because at the time, the FBI and the government, for lack of a better term, was basically ordering all of the social media platforms to take down certain posts like the Hunter Biden laptop story, despite them knowing that it was true right before an election in which that may have swayed the entire outcome of that election. But all the way down to banning like regular people's Facebook accounts for retweeting whatever story they didn't like. That was something that at first many of us did not know about, and we thought we had these free spaces to discuss things. But it slowly became more and more apparent through the 2020 election, through COVID, that was not the case. And when Elon finally bought Twitter and turned it into X, it blew the doors wide open. And the exposure of the Twitter files gave us an inside look at just what that looks like inside of a social media platform. And it also opened up X to be at least a somewhat free social media space, though it is still not perfect by any means. But in gaining this massive platform where free speech is largely allowed, it has completely transformed the news cycle. And older people sometimes don't realize how much Twitter has changed the news cycle, because if you're still getting your news from some of those centralized platforms, be it Fox News or CNBC or whatever it is, you might not realize that they have been forced to now report based upon what is breaking on X, because information will break a day before it hits the mainstream news here on X, and they will be forced to report on it because the whole world is here watching, and sources can be provided and journalists can provide information. So a lot of what we're going to do today, when we do source stories, which is not because like I'm trying to provide evidence of the truth, it's more going to be memes and funny videos and laughing at how absurd everything is. But we're going to be sourcing it from X, partially as an homage to what X is doing for this current election cycle, and partially because it's actually just where the information is flowing right now. Anyways, I'll do my best not to accidentally scroll to someone's like atrocious comment of boobies or of, just obscene language or whatever. We'll do our best to kind of keep the X profile feed PG. I've saved a whole bunch of posts that are relative to the election that will kind of weave into our discussions with various people and when I'm here solo. But that's what we're doing on the screens. So shout out to Elon Musk for first purchasing X, turning it into a mostly free speech platform, and for all the other things he's done in this election in the direction of free speech. Because, yeah, seriously, round of applause here and online, because I am of the belief that without X, this election would look dramatically different. And because my job is partially to be one of these people online that is going to be breaking any election misinformation or election stealing or any kind of weird stuff going on, I'm kind of ramping up for a busy week or two ahead of us because I fully expect some sort of a steal to be attempted and possibly more after that. And we'll talk about what I and various people think might happen this coming week. We might not go into the Diddy stuff yet, but we're going to go into places like the Diddy story, partially because it's hilarious and partially because it's fun, but also because it's very important and it's very relevant to Kamala Harris's campaign and to the current state of politics in America. So that's just to kind of give you a broad overview of, we're going to go everywhere from like the mainstream stories about the election and just basic political thoughts, of which I am not an expert. I'm just a dude. All the way down into like the tinfoil that might be coming into play during this election cycle, of which I am slightly more of an expert because I really enjoy tinfoil. It's very fun. So, yeah, welcome to the party. Thanks for coming. One more reminder, if you want to sign up to come and talk to me, if you get inspired during this discussion, feel free to find Mark, though he's running away right now. He has a sign-up sheet. He's happy to put you on it. And that's it. Phil, are you in the room and are you ready to come up and give us a little chit chat? Come on up, Phil. Come on up. Give Phil a round of applause.
And Phil's thinking he might want to talk a little bit about grid hardening.
Good to meet you, Phil.
Yes, sir.
Phil, what do we hear you're looking to talk about a little bit?
Electric grid hardening in the state of Idaho only.
I like how you're thinking. So you're going to be much more of an expert on this subject than me, but there's going to be undertones to this that are going to be very relevant to people all around the country, I would assume, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of either your background or how you came to this thought process. What are you worried about here, Phil?
Well, first of all, I'm moved here 3 years ago from Texas. Saw it turning purple and said, I got to get out of here. But I expected you can run but you can't hide. And I've been found that that's the case here because Idaho is under assault. Another subject.
Yeah.
But this is a subject that I'm very interested in, have been for 20 years, right around 2004-07 timeframe. I was talking to several people in the legislature about this subject, and they said, you seem to know a lot about this. And they said, would you be willing to write a resolution for the state legislature? And I says, well, okay. And so I did, and they said, well, now you got to be a delegate. And so I had to be elected a delegate, so I got that. Went up to the conference in Coeur d'Alene in June, presented the thing, voted on, passed.
Nice. Is that June of this year?
Yes.
Cool.
And so now the next step is to get a bill written for the legislature to review and try and pass some kind of a legislature to get the grid hardened.
I also want to give us some context here, Phil. It sounds like you have something of a background in electric power and electric grids. Is that correct?
Negative.
Cool. So how did you get first involved in looking at the grid and understanding this concern?
Well, it's kind of funny, but I was reading Popular Mechanics. And on the cover, this is strange. They show a bomb, falling down. And I was, what is this? So I opened the thing up and read it, and it was how to build an EMP. Yeah. What?
In Popular Mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and like a fool, I threw it away. Yeah, so that got me started, and I researched Peter Pry and Frank Gaffney starting the EMP Commission and so on and so on and so on. The more I spun down into this thing deeper and deeper, and found how unbelievably important it is. And so if you don't mind,
oh, absolutely.
this is an interview thing?
No, like this is an open conversation about everything. And to kind of like preface a little bit here, I think that Americans all around the country right now are actually very concerned about an EMP attack for good reason. And personally, I think that an EMP attack is not an impossible, shall we say, outcome or concern if a steal is attempted and isn't going their way, or maybe there's something already planned, or even just unrelated to the election. We're incredibly vulnerable to an EMP attack. And fortunately, people are starting to have this conversation because an EMP attack is one of the worst possible outcomes for America right now. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And when I get done talking, everybody's going to either want to slash a wrist or go out and buy a solar power generator.
Like, how secure is Idaho's grid to an EMP attack? Is there any level of security? Has anything already been done to harden the grid here, or is it just that you've passed a bill hoping to start that?
The latter, passing a bill to get it done. So that's a good segue. Cool. So let me just go through this.
Don't worry about this. We're not on any kind of hard time schedule.
Okay.
We're just chatting.
So this is to keep me on track so that I'm just hitting the bullets that are most important. So first of all, what does electric grid hardening mean? So hardening, there's hardening for what? Well, there's problems. What are the problems? Well, there's physical threats like Metcalf Station, California, 2003. Where they took down an entire grid and shut down all of San Jose power with AK-47s.
Yeah.
And it was a special op where they fired 100 rounds and there's 7.62 round casings all over the place and there wasn't one fingerprint on them. So it wasn't your teenager out for a fun time. Computer hacking is big. The electric grid has been hacked about 4,500 times in recent years. And then there's CMEs and EMPs. Now I'm gonna get into this in detail more. We're gonna skip over it for the moment. So computer hacking is very high exposure. I was in a software business besides law enforcement, and so I was a software engineer, and so I know something about it. And so you can write code to protect yourself from me, but I can write code to get around that if I know what I'm working with. And so
kind of like an ongoing wrestling match, right?
Yeah, there's no dam that stops the water. I mean, whatever you do is going to leak.
And my understanding is that our opponents like China and Russia, possibly our allies as well, have been hacking into our grid and our other computer systems for a long time, gaining access, and they have latent access to a lot of our systems right now that we've not yet found out about.
Daily.
Yeah.
They have facilities in China where they have 1,000 people in a room, which they're like almost shoulder to shoulder, and their job is to hack American systems. 24 hours a day. So big deal. And what that means is that for us to protect ourselves, we are constantly creating firewalls and new software and new hardware things to block it. But they keep coming up with solutions, which is why we keep having problems. So, but the big thing, the main focus with me is CMEs and EMPs. So what's a CME? Coronal mass ejection. You've heard of solar flares. Well, when a solar flare goes off, if you go out to space.com, they have a lot of information on this, or spaceweather.com, they have a lot of information on this, and they will tell you what the, quote, weather is right now. Telling you what's coming and what's been here recently.
That's cool.
So this is a natural phenomenon. And what happens is when that a solar flare sets off a CME, which creates electromagnetic plasma being thrown out into space at near light speed. And depending on the direction, it may or may not hit the world, the planet. But we're playing roulette. HEMP, high altitude EMP, electromagnetic pulse. That's a weapon, a nuclear weapon. And to take out the entire electric grid in America, and I'm gonna go on the high side, okay?
Yeah.
It's between 120 and 200 miles. That 200 miles, you're not going to
200 miles above the surface of the Earth.
Right. That means that not Central America or East Coast and West Coast, but half of Canada and the northern part of Mexico and all of the United States, it's lights out.
With one single weapon, right?
Just a single weapon. And how do you stop this weapon? Well, that's another subject.
Yeah.
It takes, to reach 200 miles, today we have hypersonic missiles. They're clocking at around 4,600 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do the math, it comes out to about 4.5 minutes. So if you have a cargo container ship in the Gulf of Mexico, and they open that thing up, and then this missile comes out, going a straight line, straight up over the United States, 200 miles, boom, and in 1 second, all power, everything is done. Gone.
It's important to clarify that means all planes go down, all medical equipment ceases to work, all cars turn off and can't start again, all refrigeration is down, all computers and communications are down. There, like, so many of us don't think about how, like, you're immediately stuck in place with no car to get anywhere. Anyone that's on an airplane is immediately dead. Like, there's so many cascading effects of that then the solutions are also compromised.
I'll get into the cost.
Yeah.
That's what I call a cost. So EMPs and CMEs create the maximum damage to the grid. Hacking is one thing, but let me point out before I forget that there's a gentleman, Tommy Waller. He started his own organization to try and get this across the United States.
Mm-hmm.
He has been face to face with the director of energy twice. Let me explain what you're looking at. And it's like, and nothing has been done. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, the current director of the Department of Energy is, nothing to brag about.
Yeah. So speaking of the cost.
Yeah.
So with a EMP or CME, the cost, one of the costs, Peter Pry, Dr. Peter Pry, was one of the first people to start the EMP Commission. And his estimate was 90% of the American people in less than 12 months would be dead. 90%. That sounds like a lot of cost.
Yeah.
How much money, you don't have to answer, but how much money do you think you would want to spend to keep you alive? And then multiply that by 300 or so million people. That's a lot of money, right? So I'm going to get to money, though. But we're doing absolutely nothing, and we have done since 2003, made aware of the problem. We have done absolutely nothing.
Yeah, when we get to the end here, I'm going to ask you why you think our government has done absolutely nothing, because that's a crazy question to
I have an
kind
answer.
of consider. Cool.
Fortunately. Today, electrical corporations and feds estimate hardening the grid. It was hundreds of billions of dollars, but now they're saying, well, it's $4 billion to do the United.
That's a huge drop.
$4 billion?
Yeah, that's so chill.
How much money have we sent to Ukraine?
Oh, at least several dozen billion. I think we're in the hundreds of billions at this point, right?
Right. Okay. So, wow, that's kind of odd. Doesn't it sound like somebody's working at not doing this?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you got to wonder why. Well, I can speculate on that, but I won't go there right now. If there's a power outage from a CME, it's the same thing as one EMP being fired off over the U.S. These CMEs, they're getting the first CME of any import occurred in 1859. and it took out the telegraph system across the United States. And also there was an intercontinental cable that went across to Europe, and it took that out. And that was the
And they had to fully replace that infrastructure, right? There was no
Right.
repair, so to speak. You
Right.
just replace it all.
because at the time there was no electricity per se. Okay, then there wasn't that much damage. They just got in their buggy and got on their horse and rode off, and no problem. But now we're totally dependent on electricity. So it's a completely different story. Right now, the estimate of how much this would cost, it'd be about tens of millions for the state of Idaho. We're talking about the state of Idaho. I'm not that energetic that I'm going to try and take on the whole United States. I look at myself as David and Goliath.
Yeah. And you can solve this problem locally and then, export that.
So with
Nationally.
Idaho, there's northern Idaho and then there's southern Idaho. Idaho Power covers the southern valley area and eastern corridor. 640,000 customers. And so if you take that cost, let's say $40 million, and spread that across to all the customers, it's about $1.50 a month in their bill.
So I have to kind of nudge you to jump ahead to what do you think is the reason that we're not addressing that? If it's such a low cost relative to the cost of the outcome, why is our government not hardening our grid already?
I did a lot of research on this, and there was a DHS website article that had a high-ranking military person talking about hardening. And he says, all of our sites are hardened. We're good. But, and this is the part that will make you nuts. However, it makes no sense to harden a grid for the civilian populace because it's far too much money.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
For all the American people, right?
Yeah.
That's max of something else going on behind the scenes to me.
That kind of tells you something. But the two things that stops any action is probability and cost.
Yep.
First of all, nobody's done a lot of homework. I mean, well, they've done now. There's Tommy Waller is the guy that done a lot of work nationally. And so he's found that the cost is probably $4 billion for the entire United States. So I'm guesstimating it's between 40 and 100 million here in Idaho.
So then I have two more questions for you here. The first one is, do you see any probability that any kind of grid attack happens around this election related to the election at all? Are you at all concerned about any kind of cyber attack on the grid during this election at all? Or do you think that grid concerns are sort of a different concern than election interference?
I think they're separate, but with 50,000 screaming communist Chinese moving into this country in the last 2 years, I think they didn't come here to have a picnic.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just one nation. There's plenty of other people from plenty of other nations that are coming here too.
And there's the terrorists, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then my other question to kind of wrap it up is, in case you haven't covered this yet, is there anything that Idahoans or Americans in their own states can do to help push for the hardening of the grid or to make any real impact on getting this done in the next 4 years?
Well, I've talked to some legislators, no names, and they seem to think that they don't need your opinion. They know what needs to be done, and they'll do what needs to be done. And so I got into a conversation with some of these guys, and I says, I'm trying to bring an awareness to the public here in Idaho so that they say, hey, I want this, Well, I figure if we get enough awareness, which this forum tonight really works for me, the idea is I work with senators and legislators here in Idaho get a bill written and have it passed by the legislature, and it gets sent to Idaho Power and says, yes, you're going to do this. I've worked with Idaho Power, and the most recent thing they said was I've been around the block a while. Mm-hmm. And so they gave me a task. We want you to write a report on this subject, and we want you to tell us what the scope is, what the objective is, and what are all the elements of the thing, and any costs to detail, and so on. And we will review it and decide if we're going to be participating.
Classic government.
Excuse me?
Yeah, classic government.
Yeah, and they are a quasi-government organization.
Yeah, so it sounds like, at the very least, getting loud, writing your senators, writing your congresspeople, writing your local government, and bringing it to the local and national conversations is at least the first step that regular people can do, right?
Yeah, and I really think the state of Texas is now, they have a new GOP chairman in Texas, and one of his goals is to harden the Texas grid, which the Texas grid is the Texas grid. It's only that one state. They have their own grid. So they want to harden that. The expense of that is horrendous. Yeah. So I think we got a better chance than they do.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Phil, I got to make some space for other people, but thank you for coming up. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And then this is probably going to be a running theme where people will bring me things to talk about, and then I will probably add a little tinfoil, partially because it's fun, and partially because that is my disposition. And I don't mean that in any way to say that I think that I know more than Phil, because I think that Phil pretty obviously knows more than me about this particular subject. But it's fun. And I've personally been a little bit concerned about this election because we saw in 2020 that they openly cheated in many ways, some of which were like, oh, no, some were swept under the rug afterwards. Some were just open and blatant and in our faces in the media beforehand, like the Hunter Biden laptop stuff. And I worry that if the cheating exposure is too blatant this time, if something like that is happening, I worry there might be some sort of secondary move or some sort of secondary plan. And a grid attack or a cyber attack, I think a lot of people are worried about that. And I'm not saying I have any evidence of that. I certainly do not. But I'm going to be looking for evidence of that. And I think that Phil brings up a great point that there's lots of other countries that we know have their tendrils in our grid and in our cyberspace in America. Like we know for conclusively that China and Russia, for example, have all sorts of zero-day exploits that they have already deployed into our grid. So they are chilling inside of our power grid, ready to strike if they needed to. And we're probably doing the same thing to their power grids. But that would be an act of war. So no one's pulling the trigger on that. But if something were to happen around our election with our power grid, I would be far more concerned about the enemy within than the enemy without. Because I don't think that a foreign country is likely to commit an act of war directly related to our election with the same probability as our own CIA or, an unaffiliated terrorist organization that just happens to get funding from a strange NGO that has this weird connection to this other guy. You know what I mean? That would be my concern. So if the grid does go down in any form in the next week and we blame Iran, my first thought will be, it's probably not Iran. We're obviously not streaming on Facebook or on YouTube or on TikTok tonight because that would be election interference to say something like that. But it's just my opinion. And I'm just spitting tinfoil because it's fun. If you wanted to bring up our screen onto the live stream here, there's this clip from the Tucker Carlson show recently with this gal that Tucker is talking to is actually the campaign manager for Bobby Kennedy, Amaryllis Fox. And there's all these crazy conspiracy theories because she's an ex-CIA agent. So there's all these crazy conspiracy theories about how Amaryllis Fox is like this controlled opposition controlling the Kennedy campaign for the CIA. And maybe, who knows? I have met her in person and she seemed absolutely lovely. I don't expect to be able to judge a CIA agent on a 10-minute meeting. not that, I don't pretend to know that much. But she's bringing up, everything that I know about her, she's brought up a lot of great points. She's done a lot of great things for RFK and for his campaign. And this is a really great clip where she's talking to Tucker about EMP attacks and about just how serious one might be. And she states a lot of the same things that Phil was talking about.
What could possibly be the motive for not defending yourself in a sensible way from an EMP attack? Like, I don't get that at all.
Support from the electrical industry.
Ooh, really?
And I should say that the EMP committee, their estimate was 8 to 9 out of every 10 Americans could lose their life by the end of the first year. 500,000 people in the air at any given time on 1,000 flights, right? So that's lost.
Everyone on an airplane does.
Right. So that's 500,000 people at any moment. Very quickly after that, the SCADA systems begin to fail and you have fire, you have flood. Within 72 hours, you have meltdown at all nuclear facilities. Refrigeration has gone out at supermarkets and at the regional food warehouses. So the food supply ends. There's no access to ATMs or money or financial structure of any type. No access to your prescription medications. No access to law enforcement and no clean water and no food.
All right, cool. So there's some fear mongering for us. Scary stuff. But it's worth thinking about sometimes. And I don't think that we're going to be facing anything like that, hopefully, But if you came to the talk about prepping a week or a week and a half ago that was here, that might be giving you some shades of, I'm glad I'm in Idaho, because out of all the places you could be when the grid goes down, being out here with some friends with guns and a whole bunch of cows and sheep and resources out here is not a bad deal. So in a moment, we're going to bring up Michael Moore. So Michael, you're on deck. In a moment, I'll call you up. And actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Michael as we kind of get a sense for how many people are going to be on this list. I'm going to bring up Michael right now before I start riffing on anything crazy, because I might get carried away if I start riffing too much. So Michael, why don't you come up and hang out for a minute? As you can see, we're kind of open to any kind of conversation. I'm not stressed about what we talk about. We'll kind of generally shoot for about 15 minutes per person, and we'll kind of generally flow. But Michael, it's great to meet you.
Thank you, Ian, very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming up. And make sure you kind of scooch in a little bit so that your voice is matching about my voice here.
How's that? Sound
That's
good?
great, man.
Okay.
Do you have anything particular you want to talk about, or do you want to just chat? Because I've got all kinds of questions I could ask you.
Well, how about if I tell you a little bit about me?
Absolutely.
I've been
Where
married.
you come from?
I've been married to the same woman for 40 years.
Making America great again, one year at a time.
I was a 10-year veteran of the United States Army.
Mm-hmm.
Until recently, I worked for the largest technology services company in the world.
What company was
You
that?
can look at my LinkedIn profile when you get time. And I'm exercising my freedom of speech because for the duration of that work, I was a little bit restricted on what I could talk about, things I could do. I've had high-level security clearances. To get a security clearance, a high-level security, top-secret security clearance, you have to submit yourself to a forensic financial analysis of your personal finances, everything you've ever done. And one of the subjects I wanted to cover was the concept of people in government who are elected officials should have to submit themselves to a very similar type of investigation. Elon Musk is about to be appointed the czar of waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think establishing a small team of forensic financial analysts to go back through the financial history of every person that ever served in Congress and their staff.
So let's just clarify what you just said there, because that is such a good statement. You didn't say, let's forensically analyze the people that we're bringing in today, though you, I'm sure, are saying that as well. You said, let's forensically analyze all of them across the last 20, 40, 100
that has
years.
ever served in Congress.
And get a sense for what actual corruption have we not caught?
Well, if the team who will have DOD lawyers assigned to it would discover a crime or the potential for a crime or the suspicion of a crime, that would branch off into other specialized teams that could investigate different aspects of their lives and things they were doing. I know that people who have high-level security clearances that serve our country and do dangerous things have to do that out of hand. It's just a matter of fact that you have to do that. It seems like it would be, since they're employees.
Public servants.
They're employees.
Yeah.
It seems like if you're bad performing employee, we should at least have a little talk about how the hell you became a millionaire or a billionaire.
Sir.
When you got here, you were a school teacher, or you
or a
were
bartender,
a city
or-
administrator, or you were a bartender. Yeah.
Not naming any names. I'm just giving examples.
It just seems logical. Like if we had a change in command and the concept could be floated, it would be a very effective method to get people to flip on each other and to start telling the truth. And we could publicize the results and, pay-per-view for trials for such things. I buy the full year. I buy the full year package. It's $1,000 for the package. I buy 5 packages and give them as gifts.
Yeah. With gold package, you get to see the punishments too, not just the trials.
Right. And then we get to trials for treason. Mm-hmm. We discover that those crimes are, because there's no such, in U.S. code, there's no such thing as collusion as a crime. It's not a crime anywhere in the U.S. code. Conspiracy is.
Yeah.
And treason is.
Yeah. I mean, collusion is just working together for a purpose, right?
It's a word that has nothing to do with committing a crime.
But it's once you're conspiring to commit crime, which obviously no one in our government is doing or would ever do, obviously. But if they were to be doing it, it would be great to know, because suppose there's a bunch of people, that's my sarcasm, by the way, if you're not,
Oh, no. You're
Suppose
perfect.
there's a bunch of people in our current administration, in the Democrat Party right now, that are committing a bunch of conspiracies and crimes behind the scenes. How much fear do you think they're feeling right now about an incoming Trump administration, in your opinion?
Well, if they're committing crimes and a guy's coming in who's saying, we're just going to ask questions about your crimes. I mean, I know a guy that was impeached for asking a question of another guy who was the same level. They were peers in leadership, and he asked a question, hey, could you just go and take a look at something for me, please? Because it seems kind of fishy. And then he got impeached twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
crazy how that works.
I don't think it's unreasonable to ask a question, but I think, to answer your question, I think they're terrified right now.
Terrified, right?
Reasonably so.
Yeah.
Because it's like whenever they first started going after President Trump, I was like, well, and because I didn't know. He came down the escalator. Everybody was like, and I thought, Trump, I don't know. I've seen him donate to a lot of Democrats, and nobody knew.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. And then they started accusing him of these things. And I said, well, hold on. If he's actually done any of those things, he needs to go to prison.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. He just needs to go to prison.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out there's no evidence, because if there was, that boy had been in prison.
Well, it turns out that some of the evidence was actually sponsored and paid for by yours truly, Hillary Clinton, and her campaign, in order to concoct this whole narrative that he was working for Russia while simultaneously, well, not exactly simultaneously, but while Joe Biden was doing deals with Russian oligarchs with Hunter Biden on the phone. It's like a very strange sort of a double, like.
It's a deliberate act to not talk about something that is your family business.
Absolutely.
Like, we deliberately don't go out and talk about our personal family business whenever it embarrasses us or it could get us into trouble.
So, Michael, speaking of crimes that they may have committed, that they may be afraid are going to come out, it's important to remind us all of a certain list from a man named Jeffrey Epstein. There's a whole bunch of people in office today that have been in office before that are endorsing Kamala Harris. Some that are endorsing Trump, but I would have to see that list. That list, was never exactly made public, although we all know who it is. And we all know what Jeffrey Epstein was supplying to them. And now there's also the Diddy list, which is a whole other can of worms we'll talk about. What do you think the likelihood is that... So I guess what I'm getting at is there's one level where they're conspiring to commit financial crimes, but there's another level where some of them seem to be conspiring to commit crimes against children, crimes against, like, literal humanity. And what do you think how far do you think they'd be willing to go to keep from being prosecuted and investigated for those crimes?
I think they would do anything within their power and some things that weren't to keep people from finding out.
That's a very good phrase. Anything within their power and some things that weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking forwards at this election with your life experience and your body of knowledge, what do you think is the likelihood that Trump wins with no opposition? Like, Trump just wins and it's just actually a very smooth sailing election, versus there's a steal going on, versus they've successfully, like, what do you kind of see as the likely outcome here next week?
Do you think Trump's going to win?
I think he's going to win by votes, by a landslide, but I don't know as I think that translates to him actually being given the presidency in a fair way.
That's the answer to your question, though, is I think he'll win. I don't think they'll like it. And I think they are actually doing everything they can to keep him from being acknowledged as the winner. The great thing about bureaucrats and politicians in general is they have all these rules. And I made it my life at the company I just finished working for. If I can understand your rules, I own you. You're done. You're done. You can argue and complain. I've already navigated a way around you. They're really good at executing cases, legal cases against people, farming up lawyers, creating cohorts of these specialized attorneys, and they've already got over 177 cases just this year to argue about voting rules in this country.
Yep.
So the answer to your question is, I think it's going to be. You remember Al Gore?
Yep. Absolutely.
Him and George Bush.
That was kind of my coming of age election. That was when I was first aware of the world, and boy, how far we've come.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pregnant Chads, hanging Chads.
Yeah.
You know, the pictures of the guys looking at the card like this, trying to figure out if they were really trying to vote or if they just jammed 5 cards in there and didn't jam the little punch through hard enough.
Yep.
So I think they're going to make it as difficult as they can. I've been saying to people, they can't let us get to this election. They can't let it finish. They have to do something.
Yeah.
They have to do something to keep it from being acknowledged and happening.
Yeah.
They haven't yet.
So I was actually talking to Mark earlier about how we're surprised that we've gotten this far without something
Really?
crazy going on, right?
Right.
Because like their lives literally depend on it. You know, anyone that's on the Diddy tapes, anyone that's on the Epstein list, and a whole bunch more people that have been colluding in other ways behind the scenes, their lives literally depend on this election. So I agree completely.
That's why you have to go after everyone who ever served in Congress and their staff.
Yeah. And their spouses.
Everyone.
Yep. Absolutely.
And find out what committees they were on, build an association table with cascading relationships. It's an intel operation.
Well,
to go
many of
after
them walked out the revolving door and into the revolving door at some corporation or
Doesn't
other
matter.
where they're still playing games.
Yeah, but see, that wouldn't make any difference.
Oh, exactly. Still prosecute, still investigate.
My team would have unrestricted access to everything they've ever done.
So actually, this makes me curious about, you're talking a lot about sort of like the legal angle of how you go after this. And one thing that's been a big part of this election cycle for me is the impact of Bobby Kennedy jumping in here. Because specifically, he has been litigating against these corporations. He's litigated against the CIA before. He is a lawyer in many ways and has experience. And so and I don't know if you have the same view as me here. I'm curious, how does Bobby Kennedy joining the Trump camp affect your perspective on what might come out of this? And what do you think there?
So many people love Bobby Kennedy. Like, I love him. I think whenever he talks about things, he doesn't open his mouth about things he doesn't know about. But the stuff he talks about, he knows exactly what he's talking about. And people love that about him. A lot of people were going to vote for him. Now, maybe they're going to vote for President Trump. But I think he is going to have a huge effect on the election and the outcome and how it gets litigated after.
Exactly.
If at all.
I've been in small conversations with people in his team talking about what that might look like once they get in, and it's very exciting. I don't want to spill any beans on them, but I'm very optimistic because I've intentionally been trying to get close to the Kennedy camp to sort of like and meet them in person and in social settings and low key settings to get a sense for like, do they believe their rhetoric? Like, are they being real about this? Because the claims they're making, like Elon Musk claiming that they're going to like gut the government and like get rid of all this extra
So
fat.
I tell people, I never kid. I'll make a joke and I'll tell you it's a joke, but if I say something, I'm not kidding. Bobby Kennedy does not kid.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we need right now.
Because he doesn't make threats, he makes commitments.
Yep.
Just like President Trump.
That's very well said, Michael.
Getting him connected with the program and on board with the administration, it's very empowering. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Can I ask, Michael, what your voting history is? Are you like a lifelong Republican? Have you kind of gone here or there? Are you a Democrat?
I've been a Republican, conservative, patriotic, American. To answer your question is, I voted for some Republicans that were kind of dirtbags.
Yeah, I
But
mean, many of us have been fooled many
when you
times.
flip a coin, you got to go sometimes with that instead of what you want. Now we're kind of getting what we want. And if it goes well, we could really change the way things are going for the next couple of generations.
I agree.
Reset the attitudes. I just need people to be nice to each other. Everybody's a tough guy. You know, all these Antifa kids that came here a few months ago, and the BLM guys back when that was a big deal. And we told them, you can't come here and act out like that, because regular people are fed up. They are tired of it. And most of those people never even been punched in the mouth, much less carried a gun and shot a fire in anger. They have no concept of violence. You know, a great man says, if you're not capable of great violence, you're really kind of useless. You can talk and run your mouth and have all these other things, but if you're capable of great violence and you don't commit violence, you're the most valuable thing in society, because you're a peaceful love. I want people to be nice to each other, because the alternative is people who are good at violence doing it, and that is not what we want.
Being unleashed.
The last thing we need is for the regular people to get angry enough to snap, like I was talking to Phil about earlier, because we're just kind of fed up. You can't do that here. You just snatch them up by the collar and throw them out. You can't act like that in here. You can't hurt people.
And it's refreshing how the Republican Party has maintained its place as the party of law and order, despite all this frustration and despite all the things that they've been through and Trump has been through.
There's so many people ready to give up on them.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
so that brings me to one last question that I'm really curious for your perspective on, because you're talking about how sort of like you have mostly voted as a lifelong Republican, and you say how you've sort of like sometimes you've had to vote for what seems like an establishment Republican because it's just the best we've got. And I think that a narrative that is really a question in a lot of people's mind, it's hotly debated, I've debated this online and in person, is that Trump feels like an outsider to that system. It feels like we've often been given two options that are both establishment Republican and establishment Democrat, so either way the establishment wins. Do you see it that way first? And do you think Trump was and is an outsider to that establishment system and he disrupted the Republican campaign? Or do you think that it's not quite that simple, or he's kind of on the inside anyways?
So your answer is evident in the behavior of both parties when he first ran and during his first administration. Nobody liked him. Because he is, to answer your question, he is an outsider. He believes himself to be, and he's right. And that's what we really want. I want a ruthless bastard as my president. I want a guy who does not give I want a guy who doesn't care. I don't care what we've been doing. That's dumb. We're not going to do that anymore. And he would sit in meetings, televised meetings, and go, that's a stupid idea. When did we start doing that? He'd go, oh God, we're never doing that again. Just stop doing it right now. Write up whatever it is I need to sign, and we'll get that done today, because that's dumb.
It's kind of like his famous line against Jeb Bush on the debate stage: I don't want your money, I don't need your money, I'm not going to take your money, when he's talking about all the donors that had filled up the audience. Because I kind of think that election, when he first won, I think that they might have been trying to get Jeb Bush through, and they thought he was just some random comedian on the stage, because like the Bush dynasty, clearly they were offering up another Bush for the election for the Republican side, and we were going to wind up with two establishment people. And I think that Trump just changed the game forever.
I wonder how many Bushes are a little scared right now.
Ooh, yeah. So later we're going to look at the footage of when the letter got passed around at H.W. Bush's
That's a good video.
Funeral. Yeah. Because that's where the tinfoil rubber meets the proverbial road. And maybe we're all about to find out what was in that.
Maybe not,
letter.
but just look at the video when he plays it.
We'll play that in the break in between here. Michael, any closing thoughts?
No, sir, I appreciate it. I'm glad to be in Idaho. We moved here 20 years ago from Texas.
Yeah, amen.
After an event, and after Hurricane Katrina, when they migrated 600 refugees from the affected area out of New Orleans into my little town of Louisville, Texas, and destroyed our economy, and violent crime went up. And Mrs. Moore packed all our shit and moved us to Idaho. I was on a job in Italy, but I'm so glad to be in Idaho. I love the people here. These are good. I was in an event. Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I was in an event yesterday out in Hammett, Idaho, and it was the National Precision Rifle award ceremony. They had been competing all week, and they gave it out, and there were 800 people from all over this country, and they were just like this room. They were just regular people, and all they were talking about was what's going to happen tomorrow. And that 800 people in one place.
That's so cool.
It was so awesome.
800 probably highly capable and intelligent people in one place.
The best shooters probably in the world, all in one place at one time. It was an unbelievable
Not
time.
a bad place to be during the election in case it goes south.
Thank
Michael,
you.
it's been a real pleasure. Thanks
Thank
for coming
you,
up
Ian,
here.
very much.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
What a pleasure. Thanks for coming up, Michael. Hopefully I can find, I know that I just resaved the clip that Michael is referring to of this letter. Oh, don't mind LeBron James, talking about how great a Diddy party is. But somewhere here near the top, I hope, if you're not familiar with what we're referring to, at the funeral of George H.W. Bush, so that's the father of George W. Bush, there was a letter that got handed out to a lot of the powerful people that were there. And there was a lot of very strange reactions to it on people's faces, like Bill and Hillary Clinton, the Obamas. This is Hillary reading the letter. And it's kind of become a famous piece of internet lore. Shai, if you want to bring this up onto screen for people while we do an interlude here. This is George H.W. Bush's funeral. Yeah. And if you don't know, George H.W. Bush is a very pivotal figure in the history of America. He was the director of the CIA at a critical time in history. He was the president of the United States at a critical time in history. But a lot of the actions that he did before he became director of the CIA that never got exposed during the Vietnam era are deeply tied into the growth of intelligence agencies into our world today. H.W. Bush was one of the most influential political figures in that 40 years period of American history. And he was one of the most competent power players of that generation. So his funeral is no small event. On deck, we have Carrie. Just so you know, Carrie, you're on deck. And if the bar could bring me maybe like one of these little energy sodas I was talking about at some point, that'd be great. So, I think we get the idea of this video, right? You can see the letter that they were all given. And different people had different reactions, No one knows if it was good or bad news or who sent them or what it was, but the footage is verified. Like, this is real footage of a real thing that really did happen. And that's where you start to get into this whole world of like conspiracy become reality, where tinfoil starts to merge with, the pan you cook your dinner in. And it's hard to tell just how deep the rabbit hole goes. And personally, I don't really care to necessarily delineate. It's partially because it's fun, and partially because I think it is somewhat egotistical to assume that I could know, right? I am but one humble man in this vast country of immense power brokers. And I think even a man like Elon Musk does not know what's really going on, let alone someone like myself. So coming up next is Carrie. Carrie B.S.
Farms, Idaho.
I
can do a quick intro while she comes
Absolutely,
up. So
please do. Welcome, Carrie.
So this, Ian, this is along, my new idea and passion of adding a little market to the saloon here of local, family-owned, healthy food without all the chemicals and stuff like that we're going to have in this market. And Carrie has, one of the solutions that would possibly be present in that market is her passion and what she does in life, and she's here to talk a little bit about that.
That is so great. Thanks for coming up, Carrie. Yeah. We're going to have a little Make America Healthy Again segment.
Awesome.
Partnered with, I assume, a fair bit of Make America Not a Corporate Nightmare Again segment, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, Carrie, and about sort of where you come from and what got you to this table and to this conversation today.
Well, I'm no expert of anything except for succeeding and failing as a mother, right? Mm-hmm. I have 6 kids, and I have sort of evolved in my mindset about the world and life. Grew up just thinking that the news was telling the truth, and I get my kids vaccinated, and I just do what I'm supposed to do, what the government tells me to do.
Did you grow up here in Idaho or in a different state?
I grew up in Southern California, and I've been in Idaho for about 26 years now.
Nice, cool.
Yeah, so...
How about a round of applause for 6 kids, by the way?
Making America great again, one kid at a time.
I gave birth to 4,
Nice
but 2 are my kids as
Absolutely.
well. So absolutely. So my journey into healthy eating and living started a few years ago when my youngest daughter just kept getting stomach aches. She was sick and the school was calling me and she was crying and the doctors had no answers. They gave her some medications, which blew up her face and all this weird stuff kept happening.
Was she like puberty age at the time?
She was
Earlier?
about 10. Yeah, she was about 10, but she started having issues after her very first vaccination that I gave her at age of 4. I was never a fan of the actual vaccine schedule, but I didn't have a problem with vaccines.
Yep.
But then at the age of 4, after she had her first vaccine, she started having some abdominal issues. But moving forward to when she was 10, it got really bad. And so
it sounds like that pushed you to look for alternative solutions and start doing your own research and trying to figure it out for yourself.
Exactly.
I have a very similar story that I won't go into right now, but like when the doctors have no answers, the only answer is to find one yourself.
Exactly.
Right? Especially when you're a mother.
Yes. So I ended up finding her a local functional medicine doctor, which started us on this journey of healthy eating, no seed oils, and all natural foods. Well,
Bingo.
the problem is, as you have exposed in so many of your videos, it's very difficult to find these foods. And one of our favorite foods is granola.
Yep.
And
so often granola's like third ingredient is canola oil.
yes. And I'm at Whole Foods and the co-op, and I'm looking at these ones from these bakeries, and I'm like, there is no granola without vegetable or canola oil.
Yep.
So I started making my own. And a couple years ago, I started selling it at farmers markets.
Do you have a company name or something that I can put up on the website right now?
BS Farm Idaho is my granola. I do it part-time, so I still work full-time for a nonprofit. And so this is my little granola business that I just sell at farmers markets, or if somebody buys it online, then
That's amazing.
I get it to them.
So let me riff on this for a second, because
Yeah.
I have a few things that I really need to say here. One is that so much of my platform is built on going into grocery stores and exposing how there are entire aisles in most grocery stores that have, 84 brands in the aisle, but every single one of those 84 brands is actually owned by just 5 corporations masquerading as all these different brands. And often that is actually brands that are specifically marketed as like organic alternative brands, like Annie's homegrown, like Annie's mac and cheese is one of the most common like ones that fools people. It's actually just General Mills. Siete was recently bought by PepsiCo. Siete chips. They also make all kinds of other snack foods, because these companies are constantly buying out small brands that have found success. Like if you were to keep going for 5 years and you develop a big following and people love your brand, they're going to approach you with a deal for like, hey, we'll give you $1.2 billion if you sell this whole brand to us, and then we can pretend to be a family-owned brand and just capture more and more of this marketplace.
Yeah,
right?
and so I've had to continue reading these labels for
Every time.
Siete and all these other companies, because they change the ingredients.
They buy them
so
out
you
and they change the
find
ingredients.
something that's good, that's got good stuff in it, and then all of a sudden there's canola and vegetable oil slipped right in. It's maddening.
And there's one side where it's cheaper to kind of add those ingredients, but I cannot help but wonder if there's another side where there's some sort of collaboration or deal with the pharmaceutical industry or something evil, because there are times when it just does not make sense, where when you pay for 2 ingredients, you have to pay twice as much as when you pay for 18 ingredients that come from 5 different countries. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, tell me I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, but I feel like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat sometimes, because it is everywhere, and the cheapest stuff is the most unhealthy stuff every time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So as a small business owner, you operate here in Idaho, right? Do you also sell your goods in other places other than like in the Boise area?
So far, I have only been here in Caldwell. I've only done the one farmer's market. It's,
Well, that gives us a
But my passion is for, that pure product in all these farmers markets with the small person that is making their own product. They're making it good. They're making it healthy. It's local here in Idaho.
Yeah. Which is amazing because too often I think that people in your position actually start a business for profit as their first motivation and as whatever else is their second motivation. And then they get motivated to then get approached by investors and to expand and to get branding and marketing. And too often those private equity firms and those private investors that come to approach them that say, hey, we're going to take this great idea you have and we're going to bring it to all these other people. But we're just going to like get you in touch with our marketing team and in touch with our like branding team. And they're going to really coach you through this process because we've done this for so many people before, right? And then pretty quickly, your product is no longer your product and your control over the company is no longer your control over the company, right?
Right.
So I want to just first give a quick like acknowledgement to the hard work it takes to run a business and to keep it yours and to like commit to the long-term hard work that it will be to running a business for yourself for the right reasons, because too many people run businesses for the wrong reasons. And those are the ones that get bought out later. And then we have to read the ingredients later and realize, oh, this is not the same product anymore, right? And then it segues us nicely into a little plug for what Mark is hoping to do across the street here, because this Old State Saloon is another example of family-owned business where when you have complete control of your business, you can stand for something, right? You can stand for what you believe in and make the world a better place. And Mark is taking this idea and he's purchased the property across the street and he intends to turn that into a little sort of like not farmer's market, but like a marketplace that will year round be selling products from people like yourself that are local, healthy, high quality, family and founder owned businesses so that you can come here for your libations, for your healthy food, no seed oils in the kitchen. But also you can go across the street and support small businesses, right? And not only get healthy food and high quality products for your family, but then you're also supporting you and your family, and then your dollars are going back out into your community, right? I mean, the way I see it is, it sounds like you're a little bit familiar with my content about like grocery store aisles and stuff.
Yes, my husband actually was the one who first showed it to me. And then I got caught up in the conspiracy theory stuff because I'm like,
because tinfoil is a lot of fun.
InfoWars all day. Like I'm watching all of that. So I can,
totally.
We can talk about anything.
My people. Because I have actually steered clear of the nutrition talking points a lot because it's so controversial and it's so individualized, right? And what worked for your daughter might not work for someone else's kids or for me. And so instead of going for this nutrition angle, though I have very strong opinions about it, and I do think there's some very clear red flags like seed oils, I intentionally went for the money side because I don't think anyone in America disagrees that when you're supporting founder-owned businesses and small family-owned businesses like your own, you're just doing a good thing. You're helping flow money into you, which flows money back in your community. And that money stays here in our town instead of going up to General Mills and giving like, $10 million payday bonuses to whatever CEO and corporate executives that are flying around to certain islands to do certain things that, we all have questions about.
Right.
So like there's so many incentives. And actually, when I first started on TikTok, all the liberals were sure that I was a diehard liberal, because they all agree with that whole perspective of like anti-corporate, like support small businesses. But all the conservatives were like, no, he's one of ours. And none of them knew. And they would fight in the comments over what my political leanings were because everyone agrees, right?
Yes.
So I guess here's my next question to you is, where do you see this business going? Do you want to own this business for your whole life just to do what it is? Do you want to build it into something bigger that can create more types of food? Do you want to pass it on to your kids, or do you want to hopefully find someone that has the same moral structure as you that you can pass it off to later in life? Do you have any thoughts like that?
Well, I have lots of kids, so I would love to pass it down to the kids. But honestly, I want to get it to be commercial. So right now I am functioning under the cottage license in Idaho, which is amazing.
Interesting.
Are you familiar with the cottage?
I'm not. Could you give me like the 1 minute spiel on it?
Because it's a safe food, I can make it in my home kitchen.
Cool.
So the health department approves all the ingredients. They approve all of everything that I put into the product. And then so that way you don't have to have a commercial kitchen and all these other kind of like employees and licenses and stuff. Correct. But my goal is I would like to get it into a commercial kitchen so that I can get it into stores so that
That's
more
cool.
people can enjoy a good granola that isn't full of garbage.
So you're getting my brain turning on ideas that I would pitch to Mark to be like, hey, it'd be really convenient if there was a commercial kitchen in town that small businesses could, rent time in or collaborate in order to facilitate a healthy food economy in our local space here. Just a thought. Coming to a Boise area near you soon. Coming to Eagle near you. Is there anything else before you go that you feel especially passionate about in your company or that you want to highlight or talk about before you pass the stage away?
I wasn't really here to just talk about my company versus
No, but I'm here to talk about your company.
I want to talk about just people making those choices every single day to make yourself healthier. Whatever it is, it's going for a walk, it's looking at those labels. Just stop putting the garbage in your body. It's a challenge every single day.
I'm a strong believer. So actually a little bit on my story that I said I want to go into. I'm a person that has similar but different to your daughter who had a chronic condition when I was younger that I didn't know I had, and doctors didn't really identify it. And it wasn't until my teen years, because a lot of those things come up during puberty is why I asked that. And so as puberty hit and I got less and less healthy and more of these weird symptoms, it wasn't until I started to correct them with diet, because I'd seen my mom do the same for what she had, which was similar. And when I started to correct with diet and feel healthy finally, it blew my mind how good it felt to be healthy. And I can only imagine how many Americans live with things like diabetes or live with things like chronic pain or chronic disorders, or even just live with like what I was living with was basically like just not intaking nutrients because my digestive system wasn't working. And so I just had no muscle mass, no strength, I couldn't jump, I couldn't do push-ups, I couldn't run. And I didn't even realize all the parts of being a human that I was missing out on.
Right.
Because until you feel healthy, you don't know what you're missing. And all the drugs in the world, all the highs in the world, all the escapes in the world could never compare to just being a healthy, happy human with a family, right?
Exactly. Give up the pills that are covering the symptom and go for the nutrition, which is going to heal your body.
Yeah. So defund Big Pharma, make America healthy again, and support small, local, family-owned businesses like bsfarmidaho.com. Thank you for coming up. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Just really quickly, I want to mention a quick tangent on this point. People ask me a lot how you find out who owns something. You literally just type it in. Who owns Burt's Bees? Easy. No problem. You might have to scroll around a little bit because some of the really good ones are they're good at hiding it. Press release of the Clorox company announcing acquisition agreement. Tiny text, but Clorox bought Burt's Bees. So if you're ever wondering who owns whatever brand, just type it into Google. Who owns blank? And if it gives you a name you don't recognize, type in who owns that name and follow the chain up to the top. Because if it's not a family-owned company right away, it's probably a chain of companies that goes to a big mega corporation.
Next topic is super easy.
Ooh, human trafficking.
Trafficking in churches.
Oh, cool. An angle I don't know as much about. Doreen from Meridian, you're up. Let's talk about the spicy spice. Let's go. I just want to give a quick fair warning to everyone. Doreen, welcome. Welcome to the stage. Thanks for coming. If you're not familiar with the dire state of trafficking in our country today, this is going to be a slightly sensitive topic. Send your kids out of the room if you're at home and prepare your heart a little bit for the hard reality that we all live in today. Doreen, thank you for coming. And thanks for bringing such an important topic to the table today.
Thank you. And when you first started off and started saying about we're going to be fun and have fun with this, and I'm thinking I just put in a topic of human trafficking. Wonderful. I don't want to be a buzzkill.
It's important. It matters.
It is very important. I was here a few weeks ago for your Tuesday night, Ryan Mata.
Yeah.
Here.
Shout out Ryan Mata.
And listening to that, it changed my perspective on life, and it really struck me hard listening and seeing what is truly happening. And I go to a church regularly. I'm very involved. And I was talking to one of my friends at church, and I was telling her about the human trafficking. And she said she had gone to the pastor's wife and said that, hey, we need to do something about this. And she just says, hey, we got it covered, and then just kind of brushed her off. And I really think it's a spiritual battle that we as churches need to address. And whenever I try to talk to somebody about it, they just shut me down because it's too dark, and they don't say, I've got too much going on in my life. I don't want to have to deal with this. I just don't want to know about it. And
It's very uncomfortable to talk about.
it's very uncomfortable.
Because in a way, we are all complicit by not speaking out about it.
Exactly. And I think more people need to be aware in order for them to look and see, because I'm sure there's trafficking going on in this city.
Yeah. Trafficking going on all across our country.
Yeah.
And if I can give a brief shout out to Ryan Mata, the documentary that you're referring to, he came here and gave 2 talks here and showed his documentary live here. Ryan is a friend of mine who has been working for the last 2 years, funding his own travel, his own expenses, taking on his own risk, flying around the border, traveling around the border with J.J. Carroll, who is a ex-Border Patrol, and creating this documentary called What is Treason? It's a 2-part documentary. You can go to thisistreason.com and they have it there. These ones I think you purchase for $5 or $10, and he's working on a 3rd one that will be free. But the long and the short of what he exposed is that not only are there 300,000 missing children that have been trafficked across our border that the U.S. government has openly admitted they do not know where they are today. So, maybe the number is only 300,000, but it might be much higher. But actually now the U.S. government under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris has taken on the U.S. border, the stateside part of the trafficking operation through the complex sponsorship program, whereby now the cartels just drop kids over the wall with a phone number or an address written on their body or a piece of paper, and that becomes their destination. And actually our government, using our tax dollars, will deliver them to that address with nothing more than is this like child for you, basically. And then whoever's at that address who may or may not have paid the cartel to drop that kid with that address takes that kid, and within 30 days, maybe they have to answer a phone call saying, oh yeah, the kid is fine. But they don't actually even need to talk to the kid on that one 30-day phone call. They just need to say, yeah, the kid is totally fine in this dungeon beneath this house where 60 other children have been delivered to. Like, that's just one example of like what is happening right now. And it's happening all across the country because once they get dropped across the border, like you're saying, that address could be anywhere in any state in America, and they can be being delivered to Idaho by plane, by bus, etc., just to houses, to random buildings, to
Strip clubs.
Yeah, strip clubs. And the people within that system, some of them have blown the whistle, but many of them have remained silent. And it's been going on more and more and more every year, right? And so when you finally
Correct.
see it in documentary form, like you see the video itself of what's going on, it's really heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking. And I was very disappointed that our church was like, we don't want to deal with anything about that. And I think it would be wonderful if there was some sort of program that would, I don't know if you want to say soften it, but in order to make it church friendly.
That's a very good point.
The church that I go to, they've had talks about transgenderism, different types of sexuality, very sensitive subjects. So I don't understand why, I say mine, church didn't want to address it because it is very dark and it is very difficult. But I think it would be wonderful if there was some way to make it more available to churches, make it a little softer.
I mean, one thought that comes to my mind, which is probably not a solution, but it's a thought, is that I think the reason why it's so uncomfortable to talk about child trafficking is because as mature adults, we all know what's happening to those children once they get delivered to these unknown addresses, some of which have literal sex offenders living at them. We know the unfortunate nature of what happens after that kid goes through that door and is never seen again. But there is a conversation to be had where you leave it at that and you say they're just missing and we just need to find them and know where they are, right? Because the unfortunate truth when you're talking about the church is that I can't think of anything that is more satanic and more representative of the devil with us today than a literal nationwide trafficking organization that is delivering children to these kinds of people right under our noses using our money, funded and sponsored and codified into law by our government officials, right? So I don't know what the solution is, but I know the devil when I see it. And actually seeing and learning about this aspect of the problem, the whole trafficking thing, has really pushed me towards God and towards Christianity. And it's a big part of why I came here, to kind of absorb some of the holiness that is like this community, the goodness of these people here. So thank you for coming up and bringing some light to it, despite it being a bit of a hard thing to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when I was sitting out there and I was thinking about coming up here and speaking, I'm thinking, I should just switch it over to Peanut the squirrel.
No, we'll talk about Peanut in a second. Yeah. We'll talk about Peanut in a second.
Hey, Doreen, a question for you. If you had 30 seconds and you knew the entire country had to listen to what you were going to say, every person was going to listen to your words for 30 seconds, what would you tell them?
We need to have the government stop funding the trafficking of children. We need to do better job at vetting the sponsors, and we need to start caring about the youth of this world. I mean, these are poor children that are being thrust into something horrific that no person would want their own child to endure, not even a fraction. And people need to stop thinking about, this is just some kid from Guatemala. This is somebody's child. It's somebody's daughter, somebody's son. We need to care about them.
Absolutely, Doreen. Thank you. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
Thanks for caring. Yeah. Yeah, the trafficking, the border issue too often in our current election is getting talked about as if it's like a border security issue. It's an illegal immigrants issue. It is those things too. There are people, potential terrorists walking right across. But it is also a trafficking network that is funding these networks like Diddy and Epstein and just pedophiles in general in our country. And there is no reasonable person that can accurately look at this and actually look at the evidence of what's going on and still vote for the party that is facilitating it, funding it, and causing it to explode in our country today. Mark, do you have someone else to come up right now?
Yeah, next up is Kyle Larson, and he's interested if you're willing to discuss changing perspectives on political icons.
Ooh, interesting. I like where this is going. I'm going to just leave our boy LeBron up for this one. Come on up, man. Come on up. Was it Kyle?
It is Kyle.
Kyle. Good to meet you, brother.
You too. Your name?
Ian.
Ian. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. So Kyle, I guess first, based upon what Mark just said about this topic you're interested in discussing, I'm really curious to hear what you mean by that to get us rolling here. 'Cause
Absolutely.
That sounds interesting.
Today, I would have thought I walked into the wrong bar with the MAGA hats. 4 years ago at the last election, just saw things I didn't understand, things I didn't agree with, personally, the behaviors that were going on, the words being spoken. So last week, my opinion changed, my perspective changed.
Last week.
Last week.
Okay, this is going to be awesome. Dude.
So,
Yeah.
I'll take this off, huh? So again, when I walked into this bar, I was walking down the street and I heard your voice saying,
No way.
We're going to talk about opinions. We're just going to have a friendly chat. Wow. And I stopped and I came in and I racked my brain on, what's going on in my life. What do you want to talk about? What are we here to talk about? This pertinent topic of election, leadership. Where are we going?
Yeah.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
So last week I got a 17-minute clip podcast. Ran across a man named Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck.
Yeah.
And he sat across from Elon Musk. And they had a chat about the state of the world. What made me click on it was Trump, what was in the clip notes. And I need to know more about this guy.
About Jordan Peterson?
Yes, but Trump.
Yeah.
But Trump. Because all I see is the worst bits.
Yep.
The most embarrassing, the most just...
The clips.
The clips, man. I don't know this guy.
Yep.
And he's saying some kind of fucked up stuff, and he's making fun of people on national TV, and he's spouting lies. But I've never met the guy. But to hear these two guys kind of just mull it over and paint a different picture, a more attractive picture of why is he standing in front of us? Why is he trying? Why? What is he here to do? And when I opened up and said, he's here to, I don't want to say it, he's here to do something important. He believes in something. That's what I latched onto. He actually has a drive and a care and a desire for his country, his people. He has a position of power. And again, just last week, I was anti-Trump, anti-MAGA, anti-rallies, anti-patriotics.
Dude.
And I was just like, at the same time, I'm also not a fan of Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Sleepy
right?
Joe is like leading my future. A little preface. I just turned 30 years old. I've been married for 5 months.
Oh, congratulations, man.
It's not easy.
Bad.
So lots of things are kind of culminating, and all of a sudden I have a care. Am I forming an opinion? Am I being swayed? I'm open to it,
Well, let me give you a little context on me too, because I think it's so cool that you actually you walked in here, you actually don't have context on like who I am or what my beliefs are.
Not a bit.
That's so cool. So I was raised liberal too. It sounds like you're coming from the left and from the kind of like a liberal.
I was raised
space-ish.
conservative, I'd say.
Oh, interesting.
18 years old. I do what I want.
Yeah, and then you're like, nah, I'm gonna think for myself, right? And kind of swung the other way a little bit. Yeah, so I was raised liberal, and I started to kind of like ask questions and try to form my own decisions about it all. Maybe like around COVID times, just because I was so weirded. I was in Washington State near to Seattle, and I didn't know what to think at first, but I did know that I was kind of receiving propaganda and messaging that was not honest. So I started to do the community, like the thinking for myself and researching for myself. And I'm a big proponent for like, I don't need you to think what I think. Like, I don't need, just because everyone's cheering for you, kind of saying, you're going to rethink Trump. It doesn't mean you need to like love Trump or anything.
No.
Like, I'm actually stoked to have someone here that thinks differently than most of the people that are in this room. That's so cool, dude. So I do understand and identify with how weird it can be to go from like, Trump is evil. Like Trump is literally Hitler. To like suddenly being like, well, wait a minute. Like if I ask questions about that, then suddenly so many other things have to cascade from that. And when you have relationships with people that are in the like more mainstream left, there becomes this weird like backlash of relationships that is so uncomfortable and unfortunate, right?
Right.
And it can destroy lives and families and stuff.
The things that go on behind closed doors, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
If you want to have an open door policy, you better be a Buddhist monk. And nobody can operate through this life behind closed doors all the time. And I feel like that is what the U.S. government has been doing. They have just closed the doors. They took away the gold reserve. They shut it down.
Bingo.
And they said, don't ask no questions. Eat it.
Yeah,
just
trust us.
eat it.
We got this. It'll be great.
This granola, just eat it. This General Mills, just eat it. This bleach, it's fine, bro. Horse dewormer, it's fine. And just all these stupid things get thrown at me.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I got like 10% up here, and I'm like, wait. Let me check the ingredients.
My guy.
Let me ask the questions. Let's backtrack this. Who owns this? Oh, I don't like you. You're over there on some island doing God knows what to who knows what. That could have been me. Could have been you. Could have been anybody. Because it's just frustrating to get into a position of power, not have your voice heard, not have your vision, your drive, your goals considered because there's already something going on, and we don't want to disrupt what's already working for
There's
me.
plans in place. There's a whole system. You don't want to knock anything
Take it back
over.
to Vietnam, H.W. Bush.
Bingo.
I want to ask you, Mr. Tinfoil.
Yeah, what's up?
What do you think was in that letter? What did he say?
I go two directions. One is the direction of exposing what HW was involved in that no one has yet fully exposed, because he was involved in a lot of sketchy stuff with heroin in Vietnam. And that's maybe what it was, but I lean more towards it was about the Jeffrey Epstein network or something about the trafficking in the modern generation, just based upon the reactions that some people were giving and the severity of what it was. And I don't think that the H.W. Bush funeral part was necessarily because it was about H.W., but probably more because it was a gathering place of those people in that network, is my guess.
Yeah, those big questions of who wrote that letter, who put that in slow slide to this person's envelope. Something's already going on. We have no idea.
Yeah.
And it takes a outsider like Donald Trump, who you cannot argue with his credentials.
Yeah.
He's fucking successful.
Yep.
He knows money. He runs businesses. His family is still around. However strange they are, that's a sign right there. I haven't seen Kamala
Very well
Harris's
said.
parents, her kids.
I've been seeing Candace Owens asking a lot of questions about her parents and her grandparents. I don't know what's what, but we got questions.
We got questions, and Trump, we got questions of like, what are your credentials? What are your connections? What is your?
By the way, we've all seen Joe Biden's family and his kids. So back to your point about Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's a real who's who of. Again, I'm just stepping into my life.
Yeah.
And do I really have to decide between the lesser of two evils every time?
Yeah.
Like,
agreed.
So
I have a question I'm dying to ask you, because I've done a lot of research on Trump at this point, and I'm like relatively down with his boat, more or less, but I still got a lot of criticisms of him. But what really gave me confidence in voting Trump this time for me personally was RFK, because RFK, if you don't have your tinfoil hat on, he can sound crazy, and they've done everything they can to smear him. But for me, RFK is like what the Liberal Party was supposed to be. That's what the left was supposed to be for so long, is like anti-big corporations, like cleaning up our water, cleaning up our forests and our air. Do you know anything? Have you looked at him at all? Do you know anything about him, or is your lens about him colored by like your sort of old world perspective? Like, I'm curious what you think.
5 minutes of Googling right before I walked up, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
No way.
Who the hell is that guy? He is related to the Kennedys.
Yeah.
The last great president.
Cool,
the last
dude.
Real
Yeah,
president,
for real.
Kennedy, bro.
Yeah, I got some tinfoil on that one too for later.
So that was kind of new information of,
cool.
Oh, there is, you hear the word Kennedy or Rockefeller,
Yeah.
and you know the line.
Yeah.
And so when I heard Bobby Kennedy is up, I'm like, what? That kind of would be a good choice.
Yep.
But maybe he's too much for what we need right now. We're in such a weird place in America right now.
Yeah.
Antifa, BLM, transsexual, personal autonomy, offensive words.
Yeah.
We're in this weird place that, like, bro, we can't dismantle the establishment. General Mills, like, I can't afford General Mills to just go out of business tomorrow, all right, and defund them. And now we have BS farms. That's my only option.
That's the unfortunate truth in this economy, right?
So it's a little too much too soon. Mr. Trump was a lot at the right time.
Well said.
He shook it up. He stopped. He didn't say yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He's like, no, fuck you.
Yeah, right.
And they didn't like that. They didn't like hearing that on national television. Okay.
Cool.
Why?
So Kyle, I hate to put you on the spot, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but did you vote for Donald Trump this time, or did you abstain from voting, or?
It's on the calendar. Vote. Still got to go vote.
Hey, tomorrow, baby.
Still got to go vote.
I do too tomorrow.
And I think I might vote Trump, dude.
Yeah, man.
I think I need a strong leader.
Yeah.
I don't need Sleepy Joe falling asleep at the stairs, and I definitely don't need mommy stepping in, stopping the bleeding.
Excuse me, I'm sleeping. I'm speaking. Excuse me, I'm speaking.
No. Oh, it's okay to recognize your feelings. That's a good job there.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, dude, I need to stop the BS. Stop taking rights away from parents, giving more protection to kids that aren't alive yet.
Yeah.
Unborn
Amen.
children have more protection than a born child. And it gets so convoluted. So, okay, grandpa, he'll give you a swift kick in the pants. And mommy, she'll come love you. No, I need dad to walk in here and be like, fucking listen. You're doing it wrong. And you need to stop. Okay?
Yep.
Stop that, stop that, stop that.
And it feels like we need that on the whole world stage right now. Like,
Lord
not just in
Almighty.
America, but in all of the places that all of it's so tied up
It's-
in this establishment garbage, right?
I've been hearing a lot of stories from South America,
Yep.
El Salvador, Guatemala, and the instability. Every election,
Yep.
now it's a different economic system. Now it's a different political party. Now it's ran by the cartel. There's so much going on. We really got to focus at home. And within these four walls of America, like, dude, we got to be good.
Yeah.
I need a job and I want to buy my car domestic.
Yeah.
What happened, bro? Like, bring it back.
Yep.
I don't want to say it. I'm not going to say it yet. All right. But like, just bring it back, dude.
Yeah,
like
100%.
Stop being like, oh, Guatemala needs jobs. Oh, who needs jobs? Zimbabwe. It's
Ukraine
like,
needs bombs. And,
Ukraine needs
Israel
no,
needs
Russia
bombs
needs like
and
some peace. And it's
yeah.
like, bro,
We need roads and secure schools for our children.
I got no
and-
sidewalks down
Yeah.
these streets. I'm walking on the dirt and I'm scared to get hit by a car. Give me a sidewalk before you give somebody else's kid,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, a meal. But like, bro, I got to be safe here.
Yep.
This is the greatest country on earth.
Amen.
The way it is structured, the way it has been like just no BS, work, hit it.
Yep.
And there's not a place on the planet that looks like Eagle, Idaho.
True
Just
that.
clean streets. You know what I see when I walk down the gutters? White Claws and like Pall Malls. You know what I see when I'm in Oklahoma? Like diapers and Four Locos. You know what?
Yep.
I've never been to Hong Kong, but I bet it'd be bodies.
Yeah, the rest of the world ain't looking too hot either.
No, definitely not.
But Eagle, Idaho is looking great.
It looks real great. And between just the stern voice or the soothing hand, what do we need right now? I need kids. I need the youth of America. I'm the youth of America. I'm right
Yep, same.
I'm right ahead of them. And they are just fucking hopeless, helpless. And all they have is their feelings. And if they're strong enough, maybe their voice.
Yep.
But they got nobody backing them. They have no clue what's important and what you need. What you need is different than what you want.
So true.
I need gas prices to go down. The core of humanity is to like eat, sleep, fornicate.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be having kids, I need to own my property and have like protection and safety measures in place. I can't be renting next to 600 foreigners who don't speak my language.
Amen.
And sorry, I'm not going to learn your language. You came to my house.
Yep.
Okay? I've been here for 400 years.
Yep.
This is my house. And I see it just disintegrating with personal freedoms and protections and, my feelings, my words need to be respected. I'm like, nobody's going to respect you if you don't even respect yourself. If you don't even know yourself. You're 12 years old, kid.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that you don't want to go through puberty.
Yeah.
Okay?
Maybe don't cut that off yet. You might want it later.
Yeah.
Like,
Starting to sound like a right wing extremist over there.
bro.
it's a crazy idea, right? Like, oh my gosh, puberty might be uncomfortable. Maybe you should deal with it.
Yeah, maybe. And then all of a sudden you start forming different ideas. You have that chance. God, dude, you're gonna take away your only chance
Yeah.
at 13 years old?
Sure feels that way.
I heard again, Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk. Elon Musk almost cried when he said, "My son is dead."
Yeah, it was really touching.
Said he's dead.
Yeah.
That's why they call it dead naming.
Yep.
And I was like, he's not even 18. He's not even a person.
Yeah.
And he's dead and he has no chance because even if you're
he'll
14
never
years
get
old,
that
you got to
back.
start all over. Who are you?
Yeah.
And there's no nurturer this time. There's no mommy and daddy because you burned those bridges. There's no financial support. And all of a sudden you just stand up, say, me, 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 me.
Yeah.
You know what makes me feel good? fake boobies. It's like, cool. You know what makes me feel good? A good meal.
Yeah.
You know, like at the start
A healthy
of it.
country, a happy family.
Yeah,
right? Like
man.
basics.
I walked in this bar just wanting to listen, hear him out, see if they're as crazy as Trump was day one.
Yeah.
They're not.
No.
They're not. This lady is talking about human trafficking, which is fucked up. This guy's over here talking about freedom of speech and
Great
investigating
people,
our
right?
Congress people. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about tonight, and it's just really nice to be in a place to listen. Again, me being quite a bit younger in here.
Hey, I'm the same age as you, man.
Got no gray hairs
I
up here,
appreciate
you
it.
know. And I'm forming these opinions. I am coming behind you guys. I want to do something about human trafficking. I want to do something about this the corruption and disruption that's happening between Idaho, Washington, Oregon, California, every single state, Texas.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. They're doing something.
Something, right?
Something. And it's not bad. It's not intrinsically bad.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I want to give you a huge shout out for just what, like, this is what we need more of in America is people walking into rooms where they wouldn't initially walk into, where they might feel uncomfortable in if they were to let themselves listen to the rhetoric and instead just listening, right? Like you're saying.
Yeah.
And then being willing to come up here and share your perspective is so cool. And I hope that I've made you feel welcome because I could care less.
Being
what
right
people,
here is bringing my heart rate down.
I appreciate it, man. So thank you so much for
Ian.
coming in.
Thank you
Feel
very
free to
much.
meet people.
Oh, yeah.
Feel free to hang out and talk. Like you're
Yeah,
always
that
welcome
guy is
here.
cool.
100%. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Ian.
Like, oh my gosh, that just made me so happy, guys. To like, and that's the thing is that when you come from a different world, for when you don't like live in the conservative space and you listen about conservatives, like this picture is painted as though this room should be full of Nazis, and I could not sing enough praises about the people that I've met in this room, about Mark, the owner of this establishment, about his family, and about the families that I've met here. It is just so obviously lies when really these are just regular people that want a better America for their families, their kids, their friends, their communities. So just huge shout out to Kyle for like making America great again, so to speak. Mark, who's up next?
All right. A couple things. So first, we are really getting close to announcing a special event we're doing this month that has a little bit to do with what just happened, and we're just waiting to pick a day out. But it's going to be a coming out party for anybody who is coming out as a conservative. Or maybe we should call it a transitioning party. One way or another, we'll be doing that later this month, and we're going to have 3 or 4 key speakers just going over 15 or 20 minutes, their story of going from a liberal to conservative. So that will be coming later this month in November. Next up, we have a pretty darn special guest tonight. My intelligence, if it's correct, is informing me that this gentleman is turning 21 today.
Whoa!
Dylan Neubauer, come on up, buddy.
Let's go, Dylan.
He wants to talk about election predictions,
good to meet you, man.
Gen Z, those types of things. Sit down there, sir.
Totally.
Pull
And
up
yeah, just
close,
scooch in a little
close
bit.
to that mic.
Okay.
And don't worry about all this garbage. It's just whatever, man.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to start on, or would you rather that I start and ask you some questions?
I guess I'll introduce myself first.
Yeah. What's your name? Where do you come from?
Dylan. Dylan Neubauer. I'm originally from Central Oregon. Even it's kind of conservative. It's kind of a swing state. It used to be kind of red, but now
Yeah.
it's kind of getting a little more blue and stuff like that. But I'm originally was born in Boston, Massachusetts, which
Word.
has changed dramatically ever since for the last 10 years. It's not the same Boston as before.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And then I moved to California for a year, the Bay Area, and then came up here, and then I recently came here for trade school. So I'm here for
right
school
on.
and stuff like that. I was in Utah for 2 years, and I tried doing college, but you saw how that
Yeah.
college
During
is
COVID?
No, a little bit after COVID.
A little bit after, yeah.
Yeah, college is what people have told me it actually is, and that's the reason I left and went to trade school.
So what trade are you in?
CNC.
Nice,
I'm
right
trying to
on,
get
man.
into the firearms industry and make firearms.
You
and
came
stuff
to
like
the
that.
right place. You came to the right place.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So you probably are conservative, but maybe you go both ways a little bit. Like, what's your vibe on the election right now?
I'm hoping Trump wins and wins, which I think he is going to win in landslide. They're not going to say it on mainstream media, but he is. I think he will win New York and Illinois. I was just in Chicago this summer and stuff like that, and I've seen I went from the north side to like the south side and stuff like that. And it's like the south side's still the same, like it's still poor and like super like awful and stuff like that. And like I've talked to people down there, like they're all like, I don't know, have you guys watched Benny Johnson before?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
cool person.
Yep.
He's done like interviews on the streets and stuff like that and everything. And I went down there and they told me like a lot of people in the South Side are voting for Trump, stuff like that. They're not addressing their needs of like poverty and gun violence. Chicago's too busy painting rainbow sidewalks and stuff
prosecuting
like that.
people that put skid marks on them.
Yep, and they're dealing with a migrant crisis right now with the Venezuelan Tren de Agua gang and stuff like that are taking over their homes.
Yep,
and stuff like that.
So this must be the first presidential election you've been able to vote in. Is that correct?
Yes. And I had to vote in Oregon though because I just recently moved to Idaho this August.
I've got to vote in Washington too, so I'm driving all the way there tonight.
Yep, I was just in Seattle just to visit my brother at my university.
How's Seattle looking? Is it looking horrible?
No, it's apocalypse. It's been the same as always, and like people on the streets, drugs and stuff like that, and people don't care about that. The only thing they care about is their freaking like culture wars and like all their LGBTQ stuff. That's like the only thing that matters.
So as a 21-year-old, what matters to you? Like just like you and your generation, your friend groups, like what are the issues that are the most near and dear to you? Not necessarily what's like the most important in this election, but for you personally and your friend groups, like what is it that you guys are actually paying attention to and making you vote one way or the other?
Of course, economics and like it's super hard to buy a home and stuff. Gas is high and stuff like that. I know it's not as high as here in Idaho compared to like Oregon or California, but it's still pretty high, and I wanted to get back to when Trump was in office and stuff like that. The border, even though people say for us, the younger people, to kind of stay away with that because they say that's none of our business and we're too young to get involved with that. Like it does affect us
hugely.
a lot.
I mean, I think you're more than smart enough to see how that affects the economy too, right? Like your economic future.
And like jobs and stuff like that, job opportunities like that we really need that they're giving to people who haven't even registered as U.S. citizens. And then the last thing that matters is the whole culture stuff, like the whole LGBTQ thing which in my opinion, I think it's a legit supremacist movement in my opinion.
Yeah, tell me more. What do you mean by a legit supremacist movement?
Like they're pushing their propaganda and stuff like that like I've never seen before. If you say like the wrong thing, they go after you like a bunch of like hornets.
Like
and
a religious
completely
cult kind of, right?
It is.
Right? Yeah, so personally, like I was actually relatively down with like the LGB movement, maybe you would say, like before it took on all these other like dimensions of transgenderism and of like more and more just shoving it down your throat and coming after people's kids and trying to push it into schools and push it into law, right? And it feels like, and I think you probably have your own opinions about it, but it feels like young people your age and even younger people, it's just so obvious. Like, do you agree that the younger generations notice what's going on?
Yeah, I noticed it. They did it when I was in middle school. I went to like a charter school, and they did this like right when Trump just became president. They started pushing the transgender stuff in my middle school because
in middle school.
Yeah, I went to a charter school, and that's how early it has, and people hasn't picked it up yet until like after COVID, where it got really huge. And I think people are waking up, not slowly but pretty fast about this. And like and they're calling us Nazis because we don't agree that kids' genitals should be chopped off. Like that's how desperate they are because they know this is a losing issue for them.
Yeah. So if you saw so suppose Trump gets elected this term, do you think he's going to have a lot of success? Do you think he's going to have like the whole establishment pushing back on him like he did the last time he was in? What's your like outlook for 4 years from now if he gets in?
I think the establishment is definitely going to push back, but I think he's going to have the people behind him. That is definitely for sure. And stuff like that. Even if they say like they cheat and stuff like that, it's going to be too big. Like people are definitely. I think America's going to, if they don't let Trump become president, I think America together will come together and like something will happen. Like they'll push and I think there'll be too much pressure on them to try to pull something like that, like they did in 2020.
Yeah.
And we see this many people advocating for Trump.
I sure hope so. Is there anything else that's on your mind? Like any last statement you want to make before I go on to the next person? Because I'm realizing that I'm taking a lot of time and we're going to run out of time here.
I legit hope that Trump wins, which I think he will, even though the Democrats won't admit it. And yeah, that's about it.
Dude, absolutely. Make America great again, man.
Yeah, make America
Thanks
great
for coming
again,
up.
man.
I really appreciate it, dude.
Yep.
Thanks for being here.
Hey, Dylan, happy birthday, buddy.
Yeah, happy birthday. If anyone wanted to buy Dylan a drink, tonight is a great night to buy Dylan a drink. Hopefully he has an Uber or a friend to drive him home later.
All right, our next guest is a representative of Old State Saloon. One of our bartenders, Austin Bossler, is going to come up here.
Awesome. Let's go, Austin.
He said that he would like to touch on government propaganda a bit.
100%. I think Austin and I have a similar perspective, and I'm pretty excited for this. Austin also, I think, comes from a left-wing background, right? Absolutely. Welcome to the party, man. Thanks for coming up.
Nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Sure.
My understanding is that you came here from Vegas area. Did you grow up in Vegas?
No, I actually grew up in central Wisconsin.
Even closer to that mic, sir.
Closer to the mic.
Pull
Yeah,
that
you can do
seat
the whole
forward.
chair.
There you go.
So you grew up in central Wisconsin. You grew up with a leftist family or like a Democrat family or what's?
My family was super conservative, Catholic.
Oh, interesting.
And I was raised I'm biracial, obviously. So I was very susceptible to the propaganda of the what I later learned was a very heavily left-leaning, institution as far as public school, go to college, the whole thing, follow the rules kind of a thing. So I naturally rebelled against my conservative Catholic upbringing. And it was very recently that I actually was able to go back and kind of make amends and with my family and just kind of go back to Wisconsin and see it in a different light, not being angry at the state, not being angry at my family, that kind of thing. And during COVID, that was a big wake-up call for myself. It was learning why I kind of lost a job, why I lost 4 jobs when I was living in Las Vegas. And the biggest thing for me was I have a buddy of mine that plays in the NFL. And the day that I lost 4 jobs, he signed a $94 million contract. So it kind of started to pull me out of the matrix of, who are they going to draft in the 7th round? And I'm like, I'm trying to pay rent.
Yeah.
So I started kind of going down that rabbit hole, trying to figure out kind of how we got to this point, how things are, and kind of just playing along with that. And I kind of just figured out that everyone, to an extent, has been exposed to this decades-long trillion-dollar propaganda campaign that's been going on since probably the 60s, I would say.
Absolutely.
Probably when it started.
And before we get into, because I want to dissect this a bit with you, but before we do, was it in college that you sort of like flipped left? And what part of your life, or what was it that kind of like got you with the propaganda, so to speak?
What do you mean, as far as what
Like,
broke it out
because
of it?
you were raised conservative, right? Was it just rebellion?
It was just rebellion. So I was raised conservative. I did all by sacrament. So if it turns out that St. Peter's at the pearly gates, I'm going to be set because I did everything.
Yeah.
But kind of had to come around to that. But it was COVID actually that woke me up out of it. So up until then, I was a diehard lefty. Like I was carrying water. I was making sure the crops were growing on the Democrat plantation.
Yep.
And I remember after Trayvon Martin got shot, I remember shouting down a girl in my social studies class. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what I said, but I know I was just reiterating just CNN.
And at the time, you were pro BLM. You were basically like just shouting BLM back at her, right?
Yeah, because I was the angry leftist of the family because it was fun to go against my family. That was I'd come home and they'd be watching Fox News or something like that, or go visit my grandparents, and that kind of ties into everything as far as how we were, as a collective, kind of lulled into the thought that the silent majority was a good thing, to keep your opinions to yourself, to watch, Jon Stewart and The Daily Show make fun of conservatives, and at the same time, Bill O'Reilly, Rush Limbaugh did themselves no favors for the conservative movement. Yeah. As far as not being approachable.
Yeah. And I think that kind of opens a door in my mind to the BLM stuff. Like when you're shouting back kind of like the BLM line at someone and you're in that mindset, because I come from the same mindset, the most insidious thing is that I think it gets most of us from this perspective of like, I'm kind of enlightened. Like I know I understand human rights and I understand the nuances of like what is like the greater good and equality, right? Like am I speaking a familiar language to you, right? And so when you're shouting these things back at them, you're not thinking of it as like I'm shouting against a peer that is equally educated that might know things that I don't, but rather that you're like, this person is ignorant and they don't understand the nuances of racism and they don't understand the nuances, right? Like nuances is a really, different people use different words, but for me, it's the nuances, sort of the core concept that I think liberals and leftists think that they have this monopoly on. And they assume that conservatives have no understanding of nuance. And so you dismiss your opponent before you even listen to them.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you say that it was COVID that woke you up. What specifically got you to? Because it really is like a shell. It's like a cult, a religious doctrine, right?
Yes.
And it takes something like really shattering into that. What exactly was it that shattered yours?
So I went to it was the protest and then turned into a riot on the Strip in Las Vegas. And I have a picture on my phone, and I still have the poster in my trunk that says "Black in Trump's America" with America spelled with the KKK in the middle of it. And I'm standing in front of Trump Tower, and I had my picture taken. And I reflect on that picture a lot because I have these conversations with people, and they're like, "Oh, how long have you been like this conservative, like anti-establishment?" And I'm like, 4 years, 4.5. Like it's a very new phenomenon for me to actually kind of look into things and not be married to these ideals, knowing that like these ideas aren't me. They're not a reflective of me. It's just regurgitating the propaganda mindlessly. And then when you take a step back and actually look at it, just kind of like, especially during COVID, is like why like I posted the black square. I did all of it. And so it's like
the black square was my last post on my old Instagram account before it went away.
And I remember watching like the Trump Biden debate. Like I was sitting there ready for him to bring up like the Central Park Five. I was like, get him. Like I was ready. I was believing all of the propaganda.
Yeah. And I think that this is maybe where we rewind in history a little bit, because realistically, I think that not all people, this room probably understands a little bit, but like, we're not talking about just an idea that takes it. We're talking about a CIA operation. We're talking about an intelligence agency, carefully orchestrated, constructed mind control project that they have been studying how to control people's thoughts for a very long time, and how to disrupt movements that are happening, how to subvert movements that are happening. Like the BLM riots started out of this organic BLM sentiment, right? But then you add subversive elements, you add a couple pallets of bricks, you add a few people that are, maybe not the best, and you start to massage that into what you need it to be. And that's on top of the fact that entire movements can be spawned from sort of like massaging ideals into our cultural landscape, right? Yep. I believe, I don't know if you agree with me, tell me if you do. I believe that modern leftism is basically entirely a CIA operation.
I would agree with that to an extent.
Yeah. As in, like, I grew up in an age where my dad was a Vietnam War protester. And that's a time when, so for example, right now, if you're familiar, I'm reading the book Chaos.
Yes. Tom O'Neill.
Yeah, exactly. About the Manson murders and about how Manson was actually a CIA operative, as well as I intentionally at the same time bought Strange Scenes from Laurel Canyon.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a wild dig and it's very well sourced. Yeah. Tom O'Neill. Chaos. And then there's this other book called Strange Scenes from Laurel Canyon, which is another dig into the hippie movement in general and how all of these key musical figures from that time were the children of high-ranking intelligence officers and military officers. Like Jim Morrison's dad was literally the captain of the boat that was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Like things like that, where suddenly you realize that like everyone that spawned the hippie generation of the 60s and this whole movement of like drugs and rock and roll, which subverted a very like suit and tie anti-war movement at the time, that may have been maybe like a CIA project essentially, right? How far back do you think that intelligence agency sort of cultural control goes?
So kind of tying all this together, there was this thing that was established in 1948, and it's called the Smith-Mundt Act. Mm-hmm. And in 1948, it was signed by President Truman in response to Nazi Germany, which prevented the government and media organizations from outright propagandizing the American people domestically. So looking back at history, like there are all of those cartoons of like Donald Duck as Hitler, like that kind of thing, like coming from Disney. Like we've always done propaganda, but it was always usually pointed outwards.
Yeah.
And then in 2012, the Obama administration had amended it in their NDAA and allowed not only the propaganda for the American people, but also for what the world sees with us. So it goes back to, in my opinion, I think it kind of happened in the 60s around the same kind of time.
Yeah. Also when they were starting to buy out journalists, when they were subverting like the MLK movement, trying to blackmail MLK and also like, all, like the Black Panthers, the Hells Angels, they were just like in all these organizations,
Absolutely.
Right? If anyone doesn't know the rabbit hole about them trying to blackmail MLK with this crazy letter where they tried to convince him to kill himself or else they would release information, that's a crazy Wikipedia page.
And also on that note, that it was proven in civil court that the FBI and the federal government was behind the assassination of
Absolutely.
MLK.
Yeah.
So that's
clearly
also
proven. Yeah.
That's a point of American history that people don't really know about. And that was something that really got my interest of why was I susceptible to this propaganda? Why do I get so emotional on it? Yeah. And also coinciding in 2012 was the explosion of social media.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you follow the rabbit hole on Twitter. that account?
Probably
Yeah.
do.
So he's posted a couple pictures where you can see it in the January-ish area, all of academia, the Wall Street Journal, Wall Street Times, all the big major media organizations. There's a giant spike in certain trigger words like racism, transgenderism, all this kind of stuff. And it all just kind of happened. There's a 3,000% increase in these words right in January after they put this into legislature.
Yeah. And this is off of basic Google Trends, right? Where
Correct.
they're measuring this usage in words basically across the entire internet. And the graph kind of is like, right?
Yeah,
For
just
all
skyrockets.
these words.
Correct. So you take that concept and then you pair it with how technology is just so invasive in our life now, as far as, I mean, it's so intuitive that like Facebook can tell you like when you're going to go to the bathroom, or like if you get in your car and it's like, hey, are you going to Starbucks? Like just things like that where it's kind of deep seated in there. And then if you couple that with the idea of propaganda, we've had now 12 years of individual propaganda going to custom tailored to each individual person. So that's where this Trump derangement syndrome comes from. That's why, and I'm glad that the other people that had spoken kind of hinted at that as far as like they can't have conversations. Why is that kind of a thing? Like there's no going against the doctrine kind of a thing. And it's just because people have been victimized. Like most people, I would say probably 98% of the people are victims of this propaganda scheme.
Yeah. I mean, I like to look at history in order to learn about the present, right? Partially because we know more about history than we do about the present because we're still digging, but also partially because it's less controversial, right? It's easier to criticize the Iraq war than it is the Ukraine war, but you can start to see patterns and similarities that can help to shed light for people that think differently than you and for people that think similarly to you. And here what I'm kind of like riffing on is the Patriot Act.
Yes.
And the Patriot Act in 2001, like in that era, they lied about what was actually happening under the Patriot Act's authority for quite some time. And one of the, 51 intelligence officers that signed the Hunter Biden Russian disinfo document that's saying like, for sure, this is Russian disinfo. One of them, two of them, were people that lied to the American public on the stand and perjured themselves about, no, we're not spying on American citizens with this whole Patriot Act thing. We would never do that. But they were, right?
Correct.
And that spying on every American citizen in an individualized digital way is the beginning of what you're referring to, right?
Yes.
And at first they tried to tell us they weren't doing it, but then, then they're spying on us, and then they're starting to, have AI study us, and then they're starting to target ads, and then they're starting to target propaganda. And so I guess my question is sort of, part of it is rhetorical, but part of it is like asking for your tinfoil right now, is what are they doing with that power right now that they have not yet admitted to doing to us all?
I think that they are more or less kind of priming the population to be able to do, as COVID proved, they can do whatever they want, essentially. Is that, there's a respiratory disease and everyone decides they need to go buy toilet paper.
Yeah.
Like, it's just things like that where like they're not thinking
said.
clearly, kind of a thing where they know that it's an emotional trigger.
Yeah.
Or the fact that, a big topic is abortion in this election, which is not on the ballot. It's a states' rights issue. Trump doesn't want to ban it, that kind of a thing. But for some reason, that's the emotional crutch. So it's almost like this propaganda aspect has kind of figured out human reaction. The clickbait on social media, big trigger words gets people kind of worked up and excited as far as, seeing like police shooting videos, that kind of thing. And it's a lot of the times, I think there's, it's a George Carlin quote where he's kind of riffing with some other guys, and he kind of says that there's not a need for a giant conspiracy. He's like, all you need is just one or two people with the same ideas, and everyone just wants to make money.
Bingo.
So you can have a board of 10 to 12 people. One person on there could be acting nefarious and just say, hey, if I change this, chemical in this plastic, it's going to be 15 cents cheaper. We'll make 30% more profit,
We'll
but
all
I
get
know
rich.
that it's going to hurt people in the long run. So like I know there's going to be some negative effects as far as like reproductive health or anything like that. That's going to impact the population going forward. So it just takes one person to kind of levy it with money, and everyone usually falls in line.
Yeah. And when you've got, 1,000 billionaires running these corporations, each one of them, like there's a guy in charge of Pfizer, there's a guy in charge of Dow Chemical, there's a guy like, you only need a few of them to be into some evil stuff and fly into that one island where they did that one thing for it to get pretty bad pretty quick, right?
Correct.
And so I'm thinking on two trains here. And one that you've kind of mentioned here is that they seem to have the power to make stories rise and fall that seem organic that are not.
Like Kamala Harris.
The one I'm thinking of is the Hak Twa girl.
Yes.
The Hak Twa girl was this like clearly planted story. And then, and A, that is sexual degeneracy. And then B, suddenly she's got this podcast with all this money, with all these guests being fed to her. Like, talk about a controlled,
Correct.
like narrative there. But then there's this other one that's a little more dark and nefarious that you're sort of hinting at, that you're talking about how they can kind of program us to do things like go buy toilet paper. But I start to worry that, like, because I know a lot of lefties, and I worry that they're programming us to be willing to do horrible things to each other.
Absolutely.
Because the other side is the embodiment of evil. And that is truly a dark thought to think. And it feels like what we're seeing in our digital space looks exactly what I would expect to see if they were using that power to slowly dehumanize the other side on both sides.
Yeah, that's one of the stages of having a genocide, is that you need to be able to demonize and dehumanize the other side of it.
Exactly.
So that was a big thing. That one of the other things that I really like to follow is just pop culture, entertainment. I like Marvel movies, Star Wars, all the big IPs. I'm a huge nerd. I love that. And one of the big things that happened was Gina Carano getting fired from Disney. And what she did was she just posted, well, she got fired for the pronoun thing, but one of the posts that she posted was that essentially Nazi Germany didn't happen overnight. Like, they didn't just wake up one morning and say, we need to round up all the Jews in this country and start shipping them off. Like, it doesn't happen that way. And she just wanted to paint the similarities that, you know, you start dehumanizing the other side of these people. Like, we're all Americans, but it's easy just to say, you know, you're wearing a red hat, you're wearing a blue hat, you know, you're not one of us, kind of a thing. And if you're able to do that for 12 years of individual propaganda, then when the call comes, it's not going to be crazy. Like, that's what happened in Rwanda. Like, they just got on the radio and they just said, you know, cut the tall trees, and a handful of people knew what that meant, and the country devolved into chaos in 72 hours.
Yeah. Super well said, Austin. Austin, thanks for coming up. Really appreciate it. Austin
Appreciate
is a
it.
bartender here for good reason. Thanks, man. Yeah, would you mind just kind of like a Red Bull soda kind of thing? Thanks.
All
boss.
right. Austin has signed a contract in blood to be one of the speakers at the My Transition Party event later this month.
I'll come back for that one too, Mark.
Awesome. Good. Hey, so our next interviewer or interviewee is Jen Capella.
Yes.
She wants to talk about Wall Street fraud.
Let's go, Jen. Let's expose these criminals. So if anyone doesn't know, Jen is a local here, but she's also an absolute force of nature on Capitol Hill and in the local elections and politics here. And Jen and I know each other through kind of the online investing communities, through the stock market and the fraud that sort of started with GameStop, but then has been exposed to be in so many corners of the market. So Jen, thanks for coming back.
Oh, buddy
Good
boy.
to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, welcome to the microphone.
Right
Come
on.
and scooch on in so you're nice and close to the microphone. How are you doing tonight, Jen? How are you feeling?
I am so fantastic because frickin' A, I am at the Old State Saloon and I am in front of Ian Carroll. So
Thank you.
how
Surrounded by
much
good
better
people.
does it get than that?
So, Jen, I know a fair bit about your history with MMTLP and with stocks in general. Would you give? Let me think. When did you start caring about the corruption on Wall Street and in the stock market?
Oh, dude, I started caring about the corruption and the fraud on Wall Street on December 9th, 2022. And that was when the U3 halt from FINRA and the SEC happened to our community of MMTLP.
So let's. I know a little bit about this, but having you here gives me an opportunity. Let's break this down in the simplest possible terms, because let's be clear. Finance and Wall Street is intentionally complex so that the peasants won't understand it, right? And so much of what we're talking about, like the whole Epstein thing, that is a whole bunch of finance tied into that. All the criminal trafficking networks, they are laundering all that money through our financial networks, and they rely on us not understanding the frauds so that we don't shine the light in the right places, right? It's intentionally complex. But this is one that I think we can simplify relatively easily. So there's a mining company, right? Initially, that people are investing in a public mining company. Am I correct about that, or was it a gas and oil company?
It's an oil and gas company.
Right.
Oil
and what
and
was
gas
its name
company.
originally?
It's originally it was Torchlight.
Uh-huh.
Then it became Nextbridge Hydrocarbons.
So it was a public company, right? That people were investing in, just like
Yes.
Tesla or just
Tesla,
like Verizon.
anything.
And
Yep.
regular people are just investing in this oil and gas company.
Yep,
And they came
absolutely.
out with a plan to sort of do a merger with another company
Yep.
that was normal business, right? And so everyone at the company that's holding these shares is like, sweet, we're doing a merger. This is going to be great.
Yep.
And some people were even like, I'm going to buy more shares because this is going to be a great thing for this business. It's like if Tesla announced some great new plan, it's like, I'm going to buy a bunch of shares. That's awesome. I'm going to dump my life savings into this because I think it's a great company or whatever it is, right?
Yep,
And-
absolutely.
And so then during that merger process, something weird happened, right?
Yes.
And I'm not
Yes.
just asking to lead you because this is where I'm a little fuzzy. What, like, the short version of what happened during that merger that got really weird?
Well, basically, what happened was, as investors, we were told, and just to use an analogy, imagine this: you are told that you have a bank account at your bank, and it is going to the bank is closing at noon on Friday. You have until noon on Friday to get your money out of this bank, and you're told that by every individual, every organization, everything that you know. You're supposed to get your money out of the bank on Friday.
Oh, because
Fine.
like the bank is closing.
Yep,
Because the bank is
bank's
doing this
closing,
merger with this other
bank's
company.
closing, it's merging with another company. Boom. You have until Friday.
Okay, so you had your
show
shares
up
at Torchlight
You
and you
show
did
up
that.
on Wednesday.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to get my money out of this bank. You show up at the bank on Wednesday, and there's a sign on the door of the bank on Wednesday saying, sorry, we decided to close 2 days early.
Okay, so here, now I'm going to reconnect us back to Torchlight, this oil and gas company,
Yep.
because you've just reminded me where I think I understand now what we're talking about. So you as well as all these other people around America have
Every
shares
other
in this
investor.
company, right?
Yep.
And the company is about to go through this merger, and they basically say, like, the shares are, because it was going to go private, right? So,
Correct,
so
correct.
it's like going to leave the public market and saying, basically, take your money back out. Thanks for investing with us. This is the deadline. Everyone went to go start taking their money out of that company. But the problem was that there's a whole bunch of financial institutions that have been making up shares out of nothing and selling shares that don't really exist in order to make extra money. The same thing that happened to GameStop, the same thing that happened to all these other companies on the market, because it is a blatant money printer that they have had their hands on for a long time.
Counterfeit short selling.
Yeah, naked short selling, and suddenly the people that had made up all these shares and sold them into the market, they realized that, oh no, when all these people come back to this bank to take their money out of their bank account and go home for the weekend, they're going to ask for more than are supposed to exist, and we're going to have a huge problem because the people that made up those shares are going to have to start paying out for all those shares, right? And so they did some funny business behind the
Yep,
scenes,
absolutely.
and basically closed the bank early. And this is where the U3 halt comes in, and they basically like created this whole, what essentially turned out to happen is they froze it and reversed a bunch of trades and did a whole bunch of shady stuff in the background to kind of save their own asses.
Shady as all get out.
And then it basically locked it into place, and it is still locked that way to this day, correct?
To this day.
And so everyone that had money in that company that were regular investors around America that were just doing a regular trade,
Yep.
and then were told by the company to get your money out, and when they went and tried, they couldn't. And they closed the doors. And to this day, that bank, so to speak, that bank is still a crime scene locked away that nothing has been done about, more or less.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that then brings me to the point where, let me tell you about myself. I am an individual investor, a retail investor from Eagle, Idaho, who invests in a security or a stock, like every other individual in this bar right now that has a 401k, a pension plan, a retirement. You are believing in our financial markets and our financial system. And guess what? We are being defrauded. We are being robbed. We are being
Lied to.
lied to.
Yeah.
Every single day. So when you look at your 401k or your pension or your money market account and you think, hey, I'm okay, I'm doing good. Guess what? You actually are being lied to and robbed by Wall Street fraud, corruption, and financial billionaires that are completely taking advantage of every single one of you individuals through failure to deliver, absolutely corrupt, counterfeit short selling, which is it's counterfeiting.
I mean, let's
they're
clarify,
counterfeiting
right?
stocks.
Yeah, because the company that you're talking about is just this one oil and gas company.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, I didn't own stock in that company. It's no big deal. Like, oh, like whatever. It's just this random company. But that's not actually the point, I think, in a bigger sense. Like, A, that's a problem. We should fix it. And I want to ask you about your work with sort of like the Trump side, some of the people aligned with Trump to get some movement there. But it showed that they're doing that to companies. And that just happened to be the company that closed the doors and caused a problem.
Yep.
And then they had to sort it out because they were about to get caught. But there is no reason to believe that that's the only company they're doing it to. They were doing it to GameStop. They were doing it to Bed Bath & Beyond. They were doing it to AMC. They were doing it to BlackBerry. Like, they were doing it to all those other companies, the meme stocks, quote unquote, which is a ridiculous term. But they're also doing it to this oil and gas company. Like, what companies are they not doing it to, essentially? And this MMTLP fiasco is kind of a cool one because it's locked in place.
It is.
The data is locked there.
It's
but it might be
frozen
happening
in
to
time.
NVIDIA. It might be happening to Apple. It likely is happening all across the market because they literally just have a button that they can press at all these big financial institutions that says, create a new share and sell it into the market. We'll figure it out later.
And
Trust me.
I truly have to say, every individual in this room that has an investment in Wall Street, this is happening to you. You just don't know it.
Not happening in Bitcoin though. but
Well-
but I want to take our conversation because we could go on forever about the stock market. I'm literally working on a whole documentary about it. But I want to ask you about you got really involved in politics because of this, and you've actually been
Absolutely.
to the Hill multiple times. You've been talking to senators. You've been hounding the staffers. Who in the Trump campaign and the RFK campaign possibly has been receptive, and what kind of headway have you made to just general stock market reform in general?
Well, thank you, Ian, for bringing that up. So as of December 9th, 2022, I was just Jen.
Yeah, you're
I was just Jen.
Eagle Idaho Jen.
Eagle Idaho Jen, who was riding her tractor, doing my thing, making investments in stocks and our financial markets, believing everything that America stands for. When December 9th, 2022 happened, and all my investment that I had made in the stock market was just stripped from me, taken away from me. It hit a absolute fireball within me to say, no, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And so in the past 2 years, I've taken this upon myself to understand financial fraud on Wall Street. I have gone to Washington, D.C. on 3 different occasions. I have walked the halls of Congress. I have fought for the financial market, transparency and honesty within.
I mean, you've talked to all kinds of senators and you've actually gotten some traction, I think, with people in the Trump campaign too, right?
Absolutely. I've done over 100 meetings within Congress with congressional members that have recognized that counterfeit and naked short selling is a massive problem in our financial system. I have met with SEC commissioners. I have met with advocates in the SEC. I have met with Senator Crapo. I have met with different individuals in the state of Idaho. Every individual has said, absolutely, this is a massive problem, but we don't know how to fix it.
Are you optimistic if Trump and also then RFK and these other people associated with him, if they get in, are you optimistic that change might happen? Or do you think that we're going to have to make that change happen for ourselves?
I am optimistic that it will happen because I've heard directly from Senator Crapo that if the Republicans regain control of the Senate, then the Senate Banking Committee will have the ability to call a hearing on this. And I have heard that, there are examples of counterfeit and naked short selling being a problem with election interference, be it with Trump and DJT.
Yeah, DJT stock is notoriously naked short sold.
It's
right now.
naked short sell it, and that is as a result or a reason to attack a campaign.
I mean, it controls sentiment. It makes it look like Trump is going downhill, right? So,
Yeah, no, but that is a result of counterfeit and naked short selling. Same with a very pivotal election that is happening right now is in Montana for the Senate race between Tim Sheehy, who is the Republican candidate for the Senate position, against John Tester. And Tim Sheehy has a company. He is an absolutely incredible patriot who is a Navy SEAL who has a company called Bridgerton Aerospace, who is it's a wildfire
like a
company.
wildland wildfire fighting company?
Firefighting for wildfires, and they have been shorted. Their company, Bridgerton Aerospace, have been shorted down because of John Tester, who is the Democratic incumbent. They have turned to attack Tim Sheehy's company as a weaponization of political
let me
comparisons.
summarize this to make sure I'm hearing you correctly to wrap it up here, is that you're saying that, and I think I agree with this because I've seen evidence of this myself, is that we live in such an interconnected world where finance creates politics and politics is dependent upon finance, that these financial institutions have actually learned that they can use the manipulative tactics that they've learned to use on Wall Street to actually affect political campaigns by short selling DJT stock to make DJ Donald look less popular, or by short selling the company that is funding this senator's campaign, because the money is what gets the votes, right? You have to get the advertising, you have to get the time. The campaign costs a lot of money. And so what you're kind of I think I'm hearing you right, that now the financial corruption has seeped into all these other aspects of our American life.
Absolutely.
Because money rules everything. And when the money can be manipulated, when stocks can be printed at will, when the Fed can just, there's all these different forms of monetary manipulation. And it takes people like you standing up and going to DC, going to Congress, people like us voting with an informed perspective to actually make a difference. So
yeah, and a term that can be embraced by everyone is financial terrorism. This is financial terrorism on an absolute incredible scale. And that is what,
100%
brought me from just a gal in Idaho that should be working a farm on her tractor, but it brought me to the halls of Congress to fight and say, this is not okay.
Amen, Jen. Thank you. Jen Capella, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming up. While Mark's getting the next speaker ready, I would say that the solution to financial terrorism is financial literacy. And just like media literacy, it is up to all of us and our families to develop as much financial literacy as we can personally, because ain't nobody going to teach it for us. They purposely do not teach that in school because they want you dependent on their systems. Mark, you got another one for me?
I got 5 more, brother.
Whoa, we're not going to make it through all 5 unless we do speed rounds.
Yes.
I've got 35 more minutes before I have to. Oh, real quick story. I'm about to drive to Washington State tonight because my mail-in ballot got lost in the translation to get here, and I'm not going to not vote.
It got lost.
Yeah, the people, I had friends back in Washington that were mailing it to me, and they vote Democrat. And I said, will you please mail me that ballot so I can vote? And it never showed up. So I am driving to Washington State tonight so that tomorrow morning I can cast my ballot in person. And I will be back in the afternoon tomorrow in order to commentate on the election that we are about to win with a landslide. So,
all right, our next guest with 2 decades in mainstream media experience is coming forth with a warning about mainstream media.
Let's go.
Chris Warden. Welcome, Chris Warden.
Chris Warden, thanks for coming up.
How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Good.
Yeah,
it's
man.
funny. I live down the street, and I follow you on Twitter. And I had no idea you lived here, and I was like, "Holy shit, Ian's at the bar!" And
Let's go.
We have some very young kids, and I looked at my wife, and I was like, "I'm going to the bar," and she's like, "No, you're not." So a minute ago, I ran home. We put the kids to bed. I got back on my bike. I came back down.
Dude, let's go. I'm glad you're here, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
So you have 2 decades in mainstream media experience. Tell me about this.
So for the last 20 years, I primarily work in marketing, but I do mostly media work. And over the last 20 years, I've written for, executive produced, and worked as a member of the mainstream media, basically any big mainstream outlet that you can imagine. I've played a part in producing stories and content for those publications. And I've learned a lot about the way that system works over the last 20 years, and I'm very concerned about it, as everyone should be. And I think that my prediction tomorrow is that Trump wins. I think that he's going to win 271 to 268. That's my prediction. Put that on the internet.
It's on the internet now.
And I think that everyone in this room, and I should also say, like, I'm a pretty centrist guy. Like, I'm a big Bobby Kennedy guy.
Yep.
I really wanted to see him participate and win. But anyway, regardless of your political position, I think for the next 6 months, you're going to be subjected to the most heinous propaganda environment you've ever been a part of. And I think that it's really important that everybody in this room takes a collective breath and like absorbs what you're being told, apply some first principles thinking to what you're being told from every outlet on the planet, and also invest in long format people like Ian who take the time to do longer format conversations and dig into topics. I think that Rogan is probably the most impactful, influential media member on the planet right now. Yeah. And the fact that he's had long format conversations with people has been really impactful in the media environment. And I think we're entering, about the fourth turning.
Yeah.
We are in a fourth turning moment. And my belief is that that momentous change that we're about to go through is actually going to be propagated through the media environment. And we're going to really change the way that we learn about what's going on. And we all have to be very cautious about what we hear and read.
Very well said. Let me play this idea out with you for a second here and see if you agree with me. I agree with you that I think that Trump will probably win, and that will lead to, just like it after 2016, it led to the most divisive media landscape that America has ever known. And they actually used that to great advantage. And I think that the Democrat Party and the mainstream military establishment came out better off after Trump's presidency because they had achieved so many goals behind the scenes through that media campaign. I think we're about to go through that on steroids if and when Trump wins again, right? And so prepare yourselves for that. I agree. And I think that there's something I would add to that I'm curious if you agree or not. I think that they are obviously going to do that through the mainstream media, but I think they're starting to get wise and do it through the social media too. Oh, yeah. Not like partially through people like myself that they paying behind the closed doors, but also just by feeding garbage stories, by feeding made up stories, by feeding lies, by just muddying the waters. There's all these tactics that they use these days. Do you agree with that? Do you think that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, thankfully, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk, and I'm very thankful that he bought Twitter. X, whatever. I call it Twitter. I dead named Twitter all the time. But I think it's a very important thing that he purchased that platform and that we continue to allow it to be free. I think that there's an unlimited amount of government incursion into the social media space that we're all completely unaware of. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really detrimental. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I was kind of like an active Facebook guy for the last 2 election cycles. And if I post about anything on Facebook that's politically related, zero engagement. Yep. It doesn't get any traction at all. And I think part of that's because I'm just really critical of everybody. I'm critical of both parties. And
As we should be.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of interference there that we have to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's visible in some platforms tremendously. Like TikTok, I'm about to get banned on because they have a lot of these platforms now have AIs that just scan through everything. And
you're done on TikTok,
voice,
for
right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a whole bunch of people comment on my last grocery store video of oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're back. Please don't stop making content. I'm like, I never stopped.
Never left. Yeah.
I just couldn't be here where the CIA is about to ban me every single video I put up because they have these whole AI just censorship blankets over everything.
Yeah.
Have you always been politically where you are representing today, or did you kind of walk this way from somewhere else over time?
Much like Bobby Kennedy, I didn't leave the Democrat Party; they left me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a rabid conservationist when it comes to our lands and waters and the way that we take care of our environment. I'm not brain dead climate what's the I'm not a brain dead
carbon
kind of person, but I'm like, we need to get trash out of our rivers and protect our lands.
The real problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm pretty centrist, but like the entire Overton window for politics has shifted so
100%.
dramatically that I feel much more comfortable in a place like this than I do at Whole Foods.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is like, you feel welcome in a place like this,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
Like I'm from a different place, but I love these people. I feel so welcomed by strong conservatives that have far more extreme views towards the conservative side than myself.
Yep.
But it's just so much more welcoming of a community, right?
Yeah, I ride my bike by here on my way to jiu-jitsu every day.
Hey.
And I'm always like, those are my people, like I know that anyone here would welcome me, even if I have slightly different views than they do about politics or whatever. Like the people in this room are much more welcoming than anybody else.
100%.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is, does anyone here know Curtis Yarvin?
I'm not familiar.
Mentioned Moldbug. You should look into him. Great. We have one guy in the back.
Yeah.
You and me, brother. I'll buy you a drink later. He has this great analogy about politics, and that the idea is that like we all normal people are sort of like little fish floating around in a reef, right?
Yeah.
And we're just kind of doing our lives and like enjoying our life, and maybe the water's sloshing around a little bit. It's a little bit turbulent, but way above us on the surface of the water is this hurricane storm, complete catastrophe on the surface of the water. That's politics, and that's media. The amount of power that politicians and corporations have to leverage on the media environment, there's just this global war happening above our heads, and we're getting sloshed around a little bit by it, but we don't realize it.
Yeah.
I think you have to realize that what's happening at the surface of politics and media has an enormous impact on your life and your mental health and the way that you see the world, and you have to be very cautious of that. And again, the next 6 months are going to be absolute hell as that is considered. And
even if we get the outcome we hope for, it's like still.
Well, this is my fear about Trump, is that I'm not worried about Trump. I'm worried about the reaction to Trump.
Bingo. Yeah.
Okay, that's
100%.
it. I'll get out of here.
Hey,
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming up, man. Appreciate it. I just want to point out how glad I am to have different perspectives coming up to the table. This is like so much fun. This is exactly why I do this kind of thing.
Dan Peterman, Old State Saloon calling Dan Peterman.
Dan Peterman. Oh, let's go, Dan. Let's go.
Engaging the world around you.
It's good to see
Welcome
you,
to the
man.
party.
Hey,
Give yourself a speech in
absolutely.
here.
It has been so good to get to know you, and just everything that's been going on here. It's just been a lot of fun the last few weeks. So I actually wanted to ask you a couple questions, just find out a little bit more with regard to your trajectory. And,
Yeah, sure.
Was your family, would you say they were classical liberals, as far as like no war and just kind of leave us alone and just small government? And then the second part of that question would be really what launched you into, engaged in a
where I am
culture
now.
like this. Yeah.
Yeah, my family are classical liberals. They're teacher educators, so like working in a college setting to teach teachers at the college level. And they've also been principals and elementary ed teachers and stuff like that in the past. My dad was a Vietnam War protester, and he tells those stories over and over. My mom is not as engaged in politics. She's a Canadian that's not a U.S. citizen, so she can't actually vote. But they were both of the hippie generation, and engaged in that a fair bit on that left. And so I was raised that way, and I didn't think for myself for most of my time because I grew up in a town where we all thought the same way, and most of us didn't think very much because we were out snowboarding or skateboarding or smoking weed or whatever else we did with our time.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was out in the world doing my own thing and paying for my own bills and starting to like make my way and the world started to affect me more that I was forced to think. And it was during COVID, which I've said a few times, that things started to not line up. And it was Black Lives Matter specifically because near to Seattle, I was just north of Seattle, and Seattle went through the weirdest Black Lives Matter situation I could ever, like the chop and the chaz was just
Yeah, that
this
was strange.
mind-blowingly backwards thought process. And my girlfriend at the time, actually, I had just started dating her, and she was living part-time down in Seattle, and her family was up by me, and her apartment in Seattle was inside of the chaz.
Oh, no.
And so she actually left completely and just stopped paying rent, and just because people were getting shot outside of her apartment over this it was bizarre. And that really got the gears turning. And when you start to ask questions around that cult mentality, I've always been kind of an individualistic person. And the moment you ask that first question, you get met with this don't ask questions. Like, you're not allowed to question the cult.
Yeah.
It's like, all right,
Yeah.
I've got to, now I'm asking more questions. And one thing leads to the next.
Yeah, when some of those ideas are applied, I guess it didn't work out too well. Yes. I mean,
Turns out you need a plan if you're going to declare an independent state in the middle of downtown Seattle. Something more than a few bags of potting soil and some like seedlings.
yeah.
Something more than defund the police and then let's hire anyone willing to be our police force that has a gun.
Yeah, what are they still trying to do any of that right now?
No, that got disbanded after a couple months of the experiment. But like the whole community there is still scarred. The buildings are still closed down. It's still trashed.
Yeah.
And that legacy of defund the police has obliterated liberal cities, and it has forced all of the police officers that would do police work for the honorable reasons. They don't want to do it anymore, right? Because you have no respect, you get treated like hell, and it's super dangerous now.
Yep.
And it's only the police officers that are there for the wrong reasons or because they have no other option that are still doing it. And so you actually get this inverse effect where defund the police actually causes the police force to denigrate their own moral integrity. And all the good police officers move to places like Idaho or Florida or Montana where they're going to be respected. Yeah, I have a friend of a friend who's currently trying to get a job as a police officer in Florida, and he's getting all these older dudes that have all this experience are getting hired because there's this influx of experienced police officers into Florida because they know they're going to be respected for their job there, and they're leaving places like California and Washington, for example.
Wow. Well, that's a little different. Where I come from was a pretty conservative upbringing, but in my home, my dad was in Vietnam, but he said he never saw any of that vitriol and venom when they come home, and he almost kind of alluded to the fact that it was more of some staged events.
I think it's possible, yeah.
And if you really look at some of the reels from back then, some of those kids, what they were saying, they understood the problem with the state. They understood the problem with our currency and things like that. It's very interesting. But we had in the home a newspaper called The Spotlight. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that, but it was sued into oblivion. Their sister paper now is still going, the American National, but basically their two things were reinvestigate JFK and Zionism, and now it's reinvestigate 9/11 and Zionism.
I wonder why they went out of business. That's weird.
And so right, and they're actually and they're producing their productions are right out of DC, but so there wasn't really spoken of, but I kind of had that, and so I grew up with a pretty solid Christian background, but then I rebelled and I started to just find out things the hard way, and I really attribute having a life today and a family and to Christ, and so I started getting into open air ministry and evangelism on the street. But at the same time, I was discovering the real deep problems with the state, which I thought attributed to a lot of that rebellion. And as I brought some of that to the forefront, the church I was in, they began to be upset because I was shaking the boat a little bit, and so I got pulled from leadership and different things because actually there was a contest Alex Jones did, man on the street stuff to it was a Obama dictator contest. We had a lot of fun with that, but so it was like, hey, you can't talk about those things, and it was so frustrating because discovering that. Well, all our leaders are meeting in some clandestine place in the woods, worshiping an owl statue, and understanding things about 9/11. Those things were just not accepted, and the fact is that was a lot I attribute to Alex Jones. Alex Jones was right.
He blazed a lot of trail for a lot of people.
He really did. Yeah. And
Shout out to Alex Jones.
Well,
who is currently being sued to oblivion. They're taking his platform for what? A little misinformation, like Hillary Clinton?
Right. And I think it's up for auction. Or he's
over $1 billion. They're buying it out. They're forcing him to sell it in order to pay debts to the families of the Sandy Hook families.
Yeah.
Where okay, but all these other lies, like the Jeffrey Epstein client list is still out there.
Sure, but they use little hooks and things to make him look funny, especially to the younger generations, like the gay frogs. Well, that was
actually real.
That was a plasticizer. Bisphenol X or BPA actually affects somatic and sexual development, and that's why we're seeing such an influx of that stuff when really we should be straightening out our kids and helping them. And there's going to be a certain percentage in any society, they have they're kids, you know,
Yep.
they have ideas and things come up, and our job of a parent is to straighten them out. But now we have a lot of influx of that, so that we're seeing, and you know,
Chemicals messing with
people
hormone
are just
systems
what
like
is this?
crazy.
Yeah, we're being overwhelmed by
Yeah,
it.
because I mean, all those emotions, gender ideology, like your gender development, that all comes from your hormones. Like that's why puberty, is because testosterone and estrogen and progesterone and all these hormones are doing their thing. And when you throw in hormone disrupting chemicals into our water, our air, our food, our clothes, like and our birth control, like literally into things you're stuffing into play. No wonder that people are having hormone problems and having gender problems. It's like, holy.
I even read an article, I think it was National Geographic, where there was a big dump of McDonald's in a foreign country, and the orangutans were getting into this, and they were going through puberty sooner.
Oh boy, I'm not surprised.
So
Real quickly, shout out to the Alex Jones was right counter, because the Alex Jones was right jar is overflowing at this point.
Right.
And I can't. I mean, like, I don't agree with everything he says, but Lord, do we owe him high praise and like a thank you for blazing trail for so many people that have come after, right?
And I think, though, that the way that we engage is really, questions are powerful, and being able to approach people in a way that you're listening to what they say and what they think, but it's important that we stand up, go and speak in our communities and where we're at. You know, because let's be honest, Alex Jones, he's pretty bombastic, you know, and so there is a way to approach people, but we need to be engaging the culture right now in a time where we've never seen anything like this. It's not left versus right, because I really got hold of, you know, a libertarian. I rejected the elephant and the donkey. I was like the porcupine, you know, and libertarian and anarcho-capitalism and stuff. So I didn't trust Trump right away. But, you know, he has kept promises, and he's become something of an anomaly to where now it's the culture of death against we the people. It really is.
Bottom versus top, evil versus
man, we've
good.
never seen anything like it. So, you know, tomorrow's going to be an interesting day.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming out, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, it's not left or right anymore. We're on the bottom, and we're coming for the top.
All right, speed round. We got 3 left. David's up next. He wants to talk about frazzle drip.
Ooh!
I'm just kidding. Okay, David,
I was like,
David, you're up.
Let's go.
That was a joke.
I mean, we can talk about frazzle drip if you want, David.
Maybe
it's
he
kind
does.
Of a bummer. David, how are you feeling about this election? How are you feeling right now about America?
It's going to be interesting to see how the bigger cities and the swing states are going to be, but we'll see where election manipulation could happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's going to be interesting to see with that.
Do you have a specific direction that you want to go here, or can I just ask you? I've got a bunch of curiosity
go
about
ahead.
what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Because you live here in the Eagle, Idaho area, right?
Yeah, Boise mostly.
Yeah, kind of Boise area?
Yeah.
Did you grow up here? Or are you from a different city or something?
So I am actually a native. I grew up
right
and
on. Cool.
was raised here.
Because, yeah, you must be feeling pretty good about your kind of city selection right now with what we're looking at might be happening to the bigger cities around this country.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I lived in Colorado for about 4 years and tried that out, and then basically came back home. I was like, all right, it's comfort of home.
Okay, so I know, I'm going to go kind of funny here for a second, but I know that you've worked for the BLM, for the Forest Service around the Boise area a fair bit, and you kind of know the trails and the roads back there.
Yeah.
If Civil War breaks out tomorrow and you're going to grab your guns and your buddy and run to the hills, like what logging road specifically or what zone do you think is like the ideal place to go build a treehouse and hold up for the winter? Like, is there a certain mountain range that's like particularly dope to go and hide in with your guns?
I would say with that, it really varies because with
you can give away maybe like the second or third best, so you keep the first best for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to eastern Idaho, where it's basically a little bit more farmland, a lot more water over there, and then plus if you get like some of the lower deserts versus like higher.
I see. You're going non-mountainous because I'm about to find out tomorrow how snowy the mountains are about to be when I drive through them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
So have you been a Republican voter your whole life?
I have been, and when I didn't actually vote when it was the 16 with Hillary and Trump once, because I was like, I'm checking out on that one. But then I did definitely vote for Trump.
Glad you're here now, bud.
Yeah. And the only thing I'm concerned about, like when I re-registered out here, and like I saw that like the registered area where I'm voting is like a very liberal church, and they have like the trans gay. Like,
So you
like,
threw one nice red vote in there to cancel something.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, all right, let's see if they'll actually count that one, because like I even sent you a couple like little things on.
Right on.
On
Yeah,
it.
we need poll watchers. We need citizens out there watching what's happening, taking videos or photos where you're allowed to, keeping these people to account. Because we saw what happened in 2016. We saw what happened in 2020, especially. And we're about to see the craziest election of our lifetimes, I suspect.
Right. Well, I sent you also something on X, like this guy from California, like who had no voter ID. And he basically was like, oh, I am allegedly this person.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no problem. Just like keep it rolling, right?
Yeah. So that's where it's like, all right, let's see where that goes.
I mean, I am about to drive back to Washington tomorrow to vote, where it is a no voter ID, all mail-in ballot voting state. And my mail-in ballot is somewhere in the ether, and I was able to just print off a new ballot straight out of my home printer, fill it out myself with my pen, and all I had to do was sign my name, and I'm going to take it in a blank envelope, and they are going to deliver it to my alleged county. I mean, it does technically align to my voter registration to my name, but like, you know.
Yeah. And not only that, but it's like, sure, we can figure out the process of it within like 24 hours to finally get the results.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Anyways, David, thanks for coming up for the speed round. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man.
I'm doing pretty good here, Mark. I think we're going to make it through everybody.
All right. Next up, Matt Losby, you can head your way up there. But while he's going up there, I have a guest from the audience that has a question for you.
Yeah, what's up?
James has a question.
What you got, bud?
Do you think COVID was a net positive or a net negative, zooming out beyond just the last couple of years?
That's a wicked question. There's two answers. And the first answer is obviously COVID was a net negative because there was massive tragic loss of life that cannot be undone ever. And that's not just loss of life that we already know about. That's loss of life ongoing in the future as well. That's people that are vaccine injured today. That's women whose fertility has been affected by the vaccine. That's the whole scope of COVID, not to mention the sort of latent policy shifts and mentality shifts that have gone in the wrong direction. Those are massive. The amount of totalitarianism that they were able to slide in underneath our feet that the Democrat Party is now completely okay with doing again. So there's a huge net negative. But there is a subtle piece of this question that's interesting, that it's important to look on the bright side. You know, there's an old parable about like the guy that breaks his leg, and it's like, oh, that's so bad. We'll see. And then a draft starts for the war, and he can't go because his leg is broken. It's like, oh, that's so great. And it's like, we'll see, right? Like you never know if the good is good or the bad is bad. So like, remember when it looks bad to see the good, because COVID woke a lot of people up. COVID, they overplayed their hand. They broke their own psyop. And a lot of these conversations, like the reason why we have X, a lot of this is because of COVID. So I see where you're going with that. And it's a bit of both.
So Ian, Matt next to you, he is running for Congress as a libertarian.
Right on, dude.
That I am.
For state Congress or for federal?
Federal Congress.
Whoa, dude, nice work. Nice work.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm running against Russ Fulcher, which I'm not very lucky in my choice of opponent because Russ Fulcher he's okay. My friend Todd Corsetti is the Libertarian running in District 2. He's running against Mike Swampson, and so he's got a really easy opponent to beat up on.
So is this your first time running for Congress?
It is, yes.
What's it been like? Has it been like deeply disappointing? Has it been enlightening? Like
it's been about what I expected. You know, the Libertarian Party, we don't have a lot of funding. You know, I built my website myself because I don't have donations, and that's to be expected. Idaho's a Republican state, and we know it. But it's interesting just how people react to you when you say, yeah, I'm pursuing the halls of power. You know, I just want to go in and say, hey guys, there's this document called the Constitution. Like, I think it actually allows the government to do way too much, but you guys went beyond that 100 years ago, so what the heck is going on here?
Yep.
So, you know, it's pretty fun. But.
It's wild that would be at all a like contentious stance to take. Like, we are a constitutional republic, and the Constitution has long been forgotten.
Well, are we though? Because I mean, look at the case of Wickard v. Filburn, 1942. The federal government, the Supreme Court said, "Hey, this interstate commerce clause that gives Congress the ability to regulate interstate commerce, it means that we can go to a farmer in Ohio and fine him for growing grain on his own land to feed to his own livestock. That's interstate commerce. So are we a federal republic, or are we a totalitarian oligarchy run by a massive bureaucracy of evil people?"
Very well said. And for anyone that doesn't know about the Commerce Clause that he's referring to, if anyone doesn't read the Constitution for themselves,
like Congress,
like literally everyone in this country. I actually went to the homeschool group that Mark's kids go to, and I realized in that group how much I did not know about the Constitution, because I realized in that class that I received 0 government classes in my schooling, 0 civics classes in my schooling. Never once did I read the Constitution in my schooling. Never once did I receive any minute of education about how our government works in my entire private and public school education in Washington State, which just like blew my brains out. So fortunately, I'm fixing that now, but.
Yeah, and even what they gave us in my public school in Colorado, it was, Schoolhouse Rock. Here's how a bill becomes law. And, it's nothing like that, actually, on the Hill. It's a bunch of lobbyists and a bunch of staffers get together and they write a monstrosity. And then they call up their congressman and say, okay, give a speech about this one section on page 435 that's definitely going to really resonate with your constituents, so enough that they'll ignore the $700 billion we just spent on foreign governments.
So I have a question for like the app, for all the people watching this online, the people in this room, like how, like as a sort of a regular dude, right, that just decided to run for Congress, like did you have a background in anything political before this specifically? I'm kind of asking about the pathway of how can we get more people involved?
Well, so I've been involved in the Libertarian Party since about 2019 when the call went out of, hey, the Libertarian Party has been an embarrassment for way too long. Can we try to reclaim the Libertarian word for people who actually care about liberty instead of just, apologizing for corporations and progressives? So that's when I got started getting involved there. I've been to 3 national conventions, and I am the secretary of the Idaho State Party.
Right on.
And the reason I ran was actually because under Idaho law, we needed to run 3 candidates for federal office this year in order to keep ballot access.
Heck yeah, dude.
And so I said, okay, well, if no one else is going to step forward, I'll just go out and, I'll be a messenger and say, here's what libertarianism is. It's not, oh, hey, let's support the corporations and let people do whatever they want. And no, it's property rights, it's self-ownership, it's natural rights, it's setting the boundaries of what appropriate behavior is and saying, okay, you can use violence to defend yourself, you can use violence to defend your neighbor, you can use violence to get back what has been stolen from you. Don't use violence to force somebody to pay for a gender transition. Don't use violence to go say, hey, we need the border of Ukraine and Russia to be here rather than here. And the border of Gaza and Israel needs to be here rather than here or here. Like, that's not what government is for. That's not what violence is for. Violence is for defending yourself against violent people.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Thank you for running. Thanks for being up here.
Well, thank you.
Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
And then I think we have time for one more person at the end. Do you want to say one more thing, though?
Well, so one more thing. I just want to shout out Dan, who's just started up a podcast called Roundtable Media, and so I hope people will check him out because I like him.
That's Dan, who was just up here, Roundtable Media.
Yeah.
Yeah, great shout out. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Man. Have a great night.
Yeah, I think we live in a time where the Libertarian Party is appealing to more and more people because they've experienced the authoritarian truth more and more intimately these days.
All right, the last guest for the evening is my oldest son, Ben Fitzpatrick.
Hey, let's go.
And
good to see you, Ben.
He wants to talk about the corporation.
Yes, sir. Good to see you, brother.
Good.
Good, man. Good.
First time talking about it in public, I guess.
I know, right?
Behind the bar if you've already talked it to you, but...
Do you think you can fit it in like 5 to 10 minutes? The simplest version?
Sure, yeah. I mean, essentially, if you study the most basic...
Wait. Let me paraphrase. Let me set the stage here. Do you have a driver's license?
I have an old one that I do not use in any way, shape, or form anymore. I do not have a registered car. I do not have a social security number. I no longer have a U.S. birth certificate.
But you drive a car, right?
I drive a vehicle. I get pulled over. I travel. There is no U.S. requirement as a person who lives within the states that are called the United States to drive a vehicle around as long as you're not operating in commerce. The only thing that keeps you that you have to have a driver's license if you're operating in commerce. If you're not actively making money as a UPS driver or as an Uber Eats driver, you are committing fraud by having a driver's license. I was actually pulled over by Officer Fitzpatrick last night by Ada County Sheriff's Office.
A different Fitzpatrick, right?
Yes, different Fitzpatrick, not related to us. And he explained to me that I was committing a bunch of different crimes by having all of this, by not having insurance, by not having registration, by not having a driver's license.
Plate.
Yeah, no license plate. He was running with his vehicle with his lights off. That's an infraction. I didn't want to point it out. He was already pretty upset with me. Ended up getting my vehicle towed as well. And then so I'm taking Ada County Sheriff's Office to court probably November 20th.
My guy.
And I have a it's probably a 55-page affidavit with the U.S. Passport Agency. And it is proving that I am not biologically by definition of Black's Law Book 4 a U.S. citizen. Black's Law Book 4 defines a U.S. citizen as someone who is a slave to a corporation. And if you are a capital U dot capital S citizen, the United States in that U.S. means corporated or incorporated. It is the company of the United States of America. And by you checking your name being a U.S. citizen in any way, shape, or form on your birth certificate, driver's license, hunting, fishing license, gun license for a CCW, you are saying that you're okay to the terms and conditions of the corporation of the United States controlling you in any way, shape, or form. That includes gun laws, anything. They can come up to your door and take all your guns away because you are an employee for them.
So let me clarify some things here to kind of like catch myself and the audience up, because some people don't have context, right? If I'm understanding correctly, at a certain point in the history of the United States, some real smart weasels in the government incorporated a whole bunch of laws that established the corporation of the United States as a different thing than the constitutional republic of the United States.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
And then they started writing all these laws that base upon the fact that because corporate law is very different than constitutional law, correct?
Correct.
And so now we actually are ruled by a system of laws that none of us know about because they don't want us to know about it, that are applied to the corporation of the United States and us as applying to that corporation of the United States. And you're talking about a system of law by which if you commit to it and you live by the original U.S. constitutional law and you never endorse yourself as a slave to this corporation, you actually can perfectly legally live in this entirely different way.
Yeah, I would say not even legally, but if you are operating as a U.S. citizen, you're actually committing fraud. By being a U.S. citizen, you are saying that you were born in the District of Columbia. That's where the United States is. Idaho is not even considered part of the United States if you go look in Black's Law, nor is California, nor is anything else, but they have the U.S. emblem on it, and that's why it's part of the District of Columbia. And the only way that you have to pay taxes is because you are a U.S. citizen. There is not a single tax law in any book anywhere, not statutory, common law, Black's Law, that says you have to pay income tax, sales tax, nowhere. I've never paid income tax ever in my life, and I never will.
My guy. I want to get like one or two stories from you about times that because I've heard a few of these stories before, about times that you've like educated a police officer about this, and he's been like, "Oh, that's rad," or like, "Did you told like a towing guy about it or something?" Like, What do people that should be imposing fines on you or ticketing you, not other than tonight, because it sounds like you ran up against a tough guy last night or whatever, but what are some times when people have been like, oh, this is rad, or like what's the response when you educate people about this that should be punishing you? It's
usually, first off, they're pretty frustrated, and then they kind of take it as someone who talks to themselves as a sovereign citizen. If someone tells you they're a sovereign citizen, they are lying to you. They have no idea what they're talking about. It is sovereignty means to be a king and citizen means to be a slave. It's not a real thing. The real term is state national. So I talk to them and they're like, oh, you're one of those sovereign citizen guys, huh? And I say, no, it's the legit version. I tell them about it and they're like, oh, I never learned about this. And I was like, yeah, you swore an oath to protect us as U.S. diplomats. That's the definition of what we would stand by. And if you do not protect us, we can actually sue you as an individual and not the state. So if for the example, when the officer pulled me over last night, if I go to court on the 20th of November, I would only sue him, not the state of Idaho. And if you're a U.S. citizen, you would sue the state of Idaho. And it's really dangerous for police officers and other people in law enforcement or paramedics or anyone that works at a DMV. You can pull their oath of office like this, and that's all. That's the only requirement. If they violate your anything that is your private
your personal
person,
rights. Yeah.
that's a statutory infraction. And you can pull their oath of office and they will get fired immediately because the state doesn't want to have anything to do with it because they'll know they'll lose.
Yeah.
And it's super dangerous.
Because the thing about law is that law is what it is, and it's all written right there, and it does work how it works.
Yeah.
And they've been using these games to run us for so long that it's kind of wild when Americans start figuring out the game for themselves and using it to fight back.
Yeah, so I would love a way we could live stream inside the courthouse when I go to
Oh, that would be cool.
Ada County. I don't think I don't even think if I walk in with old state stuff they'd even let me in, but we'll see.
We'll find out.
But,
We'll find out.
Awesome.
Hey, I really appreciate it, Ben.
Of course.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ben. Right on. This was so much fun. I love talking to people from all different perspectives and walks of life. We're about to wrap it up because, like I said, I'm about to drive up to Washington State to cast my ballot first thing in the morning so that I can drive all the way back here to cover the election here with you folks and a couple other friends around town. Because voting matters, right? But real quickly, before we close for the night, I want to just remind us all of a few key things that we all know, but we should all remind the world of every day. No one on the Epstein list has been prosecuted to date. They are all still running this government, running this world, and running out there free on their yachts, doing their billionaire stuff. Remember that when you cast your vote, right? Who endorses who? Same with the P. Diddy folks. Your time's coming, guys. Time's up. Chop, chop. I know you're all dancing on stage for your girl Kamala, but P. Diddy tapes are coming. And then I want to just go back to something. It's kind of something that was a theme up here and that was said more specifically by, I forget who. It's so important to talk to people that think differently than you. We do not save this country by shouting our stance across a void at the other people. You don't reach people that are on the left by shouting conservative words at them. You only reach people that are different than you by listening, by having a genuine conversation, not trying to convince people that you're right, but literally just being people together. That's why this world is so destroyed, is because everyone has been taught to fight and to hate and to argue. But that's also where we see so much good and progress coming in this world, is from things like long form podcasts and sit down discussions and people that are willing to cross boundaries and have conversations in the middle. So remember
Ian,
that.
So not trying to pump Old State Saloon here at all, but from the bottom of my heart, I wish there was 5,000 bars across the country that people were meeting at tonight, just like this.
100%. We need more physical locations across the country that seek truth and discussion and debate, not necessarily in any one direction, but just in the direction of humanity. Because there are strong arguments to be made for true, leftist ideals, not whatever CIA psyop they've cooked up today. There are great arguments to be made for conservative ideals, and the whole point of government and a duopoly is that naturally humans fall along spectrums of ideas and all ideas, and we naturally want to have people that have different perspectives in this direction and that direction, having rational debate to dissect what ideas stand the test of debate, right? The marketplace of ideas does not get healed by censorship of ideas. It gets healed by better ideas winning in open discussion, and that's not a competition of who's right and wrong. It's a continual joint venture towards the truth, right? And so just remember that when you go out from here, when you go out beyond this election, when you're out in your family for Thanksgiving, you're probably going to be talking to some people that don't think exactly like you. Remember that you're going to have so much better of a time and you're going to get so much farther with them if you listen instead of trying to convince people of your perspective. The first thing you have to do, like our homie who came in here and was like, didn't know this bar and thought that it was going to be, and he's like, I just came in to listen. And when you listen to what people have to say and they listen to you, that's where you start to build bridges and people start to understand new perspectives and something new can happen. So that's what I want to leave us on tonight. I'm praying for a safe outcome for America tomorrow, for a safe outcome for all of you and your families. Thank you for all being here and doing your part to support free speech and to support listening and conversations. Mark, thank you to Old State Saloon. If you're not familiar, this is Old State Saloon Cast. Huge shout out to Old State Saloon. and to Mark Fitzpatrick and his family for putting this on and running the show. And thank you all for coming out tonight.
Good night, everybody.